evening. So I would like to call the meeting to order and begin by thanking you all for coming to tonight's town hall to discuss the proposed tolling of the I-83 South Bridge. The purpose of tonight's council meeting is really twofold. First, it's informational. We want to make sure that residents of Camp Hill and the surrounding communities understand the scope of the proposed project and the anticipated negative impacts on our communities. Second, we want to bring together the many communities that will be harmed by this proposed tolling project so that we can work collectively in our efforts to protect our communities and the interests of those we were elected to represent. We have a very full agenda this evening. Our first speaker will be our borough engineer, Mike Hess with HRG. Mr. Hess will give an overview of the proposed project and discuss the potential negative impacts on our community as we understand them. I do want to note that PennDOT representatives were invited to be present at this meeting and to lead this part of the agenda, but they declined our invitation. So we do ask that you remember Mike is our borough engineer and is offering his opinion based on the information available from PennDOT. We ask that you not direct your displeasure with this project towards Mr. Hess.
Thank you. Thank you.
We will next hear from State Representatives Greg Rothman and Cheryl Deloger, who will shed light on the legislature's involvement in the process, followed by our county commissioners, Bashi and DiFilippo, along with Kirk Stoner, County Director of Planning. They'll speak to the county's response to the project. And finally, I'll share an overview of the potential action to oppose the project that is on the agenda for our council meeting at 7 p.m. this evening. We'll end with a period of time devoted to public questions and comment. And the town hall will end at 6:50 to allow us time to get ready for our 7 p.m. meeting. So we will then allow any comment that we don't get to hear during the town hall to continue during the initial public comment period of our following council meeting. So again, thank you all for coming. And without further ado, I'd like to invite Mike Hess from HRG to the podium.
Thank you, especially for the disclaimer. I appreciate it. I'm Mike Hess. I'm with HRG, with the borough's engineer. I wanted to provide some background on the project. I'm going to start kind of at the very beginning. I think some of this will be old news to a lot of you, but didn't want to leave anyone out who might just be hearing about the project. So just start from ground zero. So what is the need for the project? Why is PennDOT talking about doing anything? Well, the I-83 bridge, the South Bridge, officially the John Harris Memorial Bridge, is getting old. It's about 61 years old. It was built in 1960. It was upgraded in 1982, and it's getting to the end of its serviceable life. And it's not really feasible in PennDOT's assessment to repair it or patch it up. A lot of those Band-Aid fixes have been done, and they just don't last forever. PennDOT's determined that a new bridge is needed. Currently, that bridge carries about 125,000 vehicles per day. And it doesn't have capacity to carry the traffic that it has now or the increase in traffic that PennDOT forecasts for the future. So there's a need to replace the bridge. They're talking about a full replacement. They're not talking about a deck replacement or a superstructure replacement. It would be a new bridge from the ground up. They're talking about doing 5 lanes in each direction, which would increase the capacity to carry traffic versus what's there now. In order to tie into that new bridge, they're also proposing to do a new interchange in Lemoyne, which would include a new 3rd Street bridge over 83, a longer bridge to cross the wider highway, and some other improvements in the Lemoyne area to access that newer bridge. Cost of the project is between 500 million and 650 million in PennDOT's estimate. So very large project, is a very large piece of infrastructure. PennDOT has indicated that they don't have funding in their budget to do this project, and have even made some off-the-cuff comments about if they were to do this, then they wouldn't be able to do any other projects for several years. This would consume more than their annual budget to do the I-83 bridge replacement. So that begs the question of, well, how does PennDOT propose to fund the bridge, which I think a lot of you have heard about and is why you're here tonight. They're proposing a toll. The bridge would be built under a P3 contract, and this is the first of many acronyms, so remind me to explain them if I gloss over any. P3 is a public-private partnership. This is a project in which PennDOT would solicit funding from the private sector, whether it's investors or a contractor or whatever the party may be, that would fund construction of the bridge. And then that party would be paid back over time through the tolls. The tolls that they propose to assess on the I-83 bridge, they've indicated would go specifically to reimbursing the construction and the ongoing maintenance of that bridge. The dollars wouldn't be shipped to another location. It's kind of an open question at this point what the toll would be. PennDOT hasn't put that information out there, but what they have said is that a typical toll for a bridge of this type is in the range of $1 to $2 per trip. Toll would be collected, it would be fully automated tolling. There wouldn't be toll booths. There wouldn't be, you wouldn't have to get off the highway and get back on. It would all be either toll by plate or Easy Pass. PennDOT has also indicated they're working on a program for low income drivers so that people who really can't afford it can still get across the bridge and get to work. What's the current status of the project? Currently, PennDOT's in the step called environmental assessment, which is a little bit misleading. There's absolutely an environmental aspect, but there are other aspects as well for things like communities' quality of life, health, safety, cultural resources. I think very much the things that you all are here to talk about tonight. That environmental assessment has to be approved at the federal level by FHWA and the U.S. Department of Transportation. Before it can go to be approved at the federal level, it has to go through a 30-day public review and comment period, which PennDOT has scheduled that for the spring of this year. No specific dates are out there yet, but spring of this year is coming right up. And then they anticipate a decision from the federal level on that environmental assessment in late spring or early summer. If that EA is approved, then they would go to right-of-way acquisition and final design with a construction start date estimated of 2024, so 2 years out. So that's a lot of the background that I think a lot of you probably already know. The big concern that we have from the engineering and technical standpoint, I think, is the same that a lot of you probably share, which is how are trips going to reroute. So once the bridge is built, there's going to be a certain percentage of that traffic that wants to find another route to avoid the toll. The Harvey Taylor Bridge is an attractive option if you're a motorist and you want to avoid the I-83 toll, which means that you could conceivably reroute through the Camp Hill bypass to get across the Harvey Taylor. Camp Hill bypass has about 23,000 trips per day, which is about 1/5 the traffic volume of the South Bridge. So if 1% of the South Bridge traffic were to reroute to the bypass would see a 5% increase in its traffic. If 10% of the I-83 South Bridge traffic was to reroute to the bypass would see a 50% increase in its traffic because there's 5 times more traffic on the South Bridge. So a little bit of a ripple on the South Bridge would go a long way on the bypass. It's an open question, and I think that one that we really want to look into as a borough about how has PennDOT calculated that rerouting. They haven't made their traffic study public at this point. We've had some conversations about trying to get one through the Freedom of Information Act request so that we can see how they've calculated this rerouting and a number of other things. But that's kind of a nuanced bit of science and engineering. The traffic part of it is pretty well established, but the human nature and the psychology of who's going to reroute and when and why is a little bit less solid. So we want to make sure that PennDOT has done whatever analysis they've done based on sound assumptions in that regard. They've really accommodated what we agree would be the human nature of how people are going to reroute. So a good example is if somebody's coming from I-83 from, let's say, York, Baltimore area, and they want to get to 81, they're probably not going to reroute because that would be a long way around. If they're coming from Mechanicsburg and they want to get downtown, there's a very good chance that they would reroute. So has PennDOT really considered that kind of nuance in their alternatives analysis? I think it's something that we really want to understand. And if we don't agree with any of those aspects, we really want to push back and say, no, we think that it's X instead of Y. But like I said, that information is not out there publicly. We're looking at ways to get it so we can really dig in and get a better understanding there. The other factor is if traffic reroutes onto the bypass and the bypass is congested, which it already is, especially during rush hours, would those motorists then try to bypass the bypass by using borough streets, which would be an even bigger concern, especially from a pedestrian standpoint, and because there's parking on a lot of those streets. So once that rerouting number is established, PennDOT would be required to mitigate for it. So what type of things might they do to mitigate? If there's going to be more traffic on the bypass, what could they do? A lot of it will probably focus on the signals. We'll probably have to retime some of the signals. They might have to look at adding turning lanes to some of the signals. And one of the difficulties that we have with changing the signal timing in Camp Hill is that a number of those signals have a dedicated pedestrian phase, which is kind of unique. That gives priority to pedestrians. And if somebody pushes the button, all four ways of traffic are stopped, and it's an exclusive pedestrian phase. That's uncommon. And that's something that if PennDOT wants to get more capacity out of those intersections for vehicles, they might take away the dedicated PED phase, the dedicated pedestrian phase, and make that a combined phase, which would give them more vehicles, but less pedestrian safety. So these are all things that we have very big questions about, and we want to understand from PennDOT's traffic analysis how they propose to mitigate that. PennDOT has indicated on the website that they are performing a diversion analysis. I don't know if it's complete. It should be at this point if they're filing an environmental assessment, because they need to understand, to get environmental clearance, what their right-of-way impacts are. And if they're going to get right-of-way impacts, they need to know where their turning lanes are. So we think that that analysis is probably complete somewhere at PennDOT, and are working to get a hold of it. Don't have it as of today because, as was mentioned, PennDOT didn't want to come, so we were kind of brought into the mix here late in the game. So that's sort of some general background on the project. Anything else you want me to address? Or?
I don't think so right now. I think, when people have questions, if people have questions for you, we'll invite you back up.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you, Mike.
Sure.
Okay, we would next like to hear from our state representatives, Greg Rothman and Cheryl Delosier, about the legislative involvement and response.
We can go together. Nice to see everybody. I'm Greg Rothman. I have the honor of representing Camp Hill Borough in the House of Representatives. I also represent East Pennsboro, Hampton, and about 2/3 of Silver Spring Township. Cheryl Delosier, my colleague, who's the dean of the Cumberland County delegation, and she's going to go through the timeline, and then I'm going to talk about what we are trying to. We'll both talk about it, but I'll talk about what legislation we recently passed to try to respond to this, and then other ideas we might have. Sure.
Thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to speak, dealing with the issues of the timeline. So when was mentioned about the P3 project, the P3 project in working with the board. The P3 board was established by legislation a number of years ago, and P3 projects as a whole are very good projects. They work with local municipalities that may not have the funds to be able to provide certain services, and they make projects with private industry that do have the ability to provide certain services. So that's a partnership. So P3 agreements are good agreements, and they're ones that have worked very, very well for our local governments, our county governments, and our state government. What we are talking about, and the legislation that Greg will go through, what we are talking about is back in November 12th, and that is a key date. November 12th, the P3 board made the decision the vote was taken to look at tolling in the state of Pennsylvania. P3 board absolutely has the authority and the ability to do so, to take a look at what tolling and other options are for revenue generation. The issue was the fact that at that board meeting on the 12th, nothing was indicated as to what would be tolled and where those tolls locations would be. So the vote that was taken at that particular time was simply in an agreement by all the members of the P3 board to take a look in Pennsylvania at tolling across the state. Move forward, the legislation that established the P3 board in and of itself had established a timeline, 20 days, 9 session days, whatever the specific time ability for the legislature to take a look at something that the P3 board had put forward. If there was disagreement with it or their constituencies did not like that, they had the opportunity to pass resolutions to stop it. What did not happen with this project was that when it was passed on November 12th, that started the tolling of the days. And it's the same word, so I apologize, that was not meant to be a pun. But the bottom line was that the days start tolling as soon as that vote is taken. So once that happened, all of a sudden it was passed at a time when the legislature was not in Harrisburg. So those days were counting, the calendar days were counting, and the session days were counting. So the days ended up tolling out. That was when PennDOT announced what bridges would be tolled. At that point, the legislature had no ability to take their constituencies' concerns and pass a resolution that would stop the tolling. So the ability for us, and a lot of times it would be pointed back to the legislation that originally established P3, and it absolutely did establish the board of the P3 and many, many projects that have happened since then. But the issue that arose with this particular project was that the dates and the ability to skirt the time of the tolling of those days was not honored. The idea behind the legislation was that the legislature would have the ability to check and balance, which is the legislator's job. The ability to check and balance what is being put forward by PennDOT, and not just a free run by PennDOT and the P3 board to say, yes, we're tolling, you have nothing to say about it. Sorry, we didn't give you all the information. We did have legislation, which Greg is going to go through, which the idea was, we thought it was pretty clear when the original legislation was put through, but obviously there was a way to skirt those issues by passing something when the legislature is not in session. The legislative establishment of P3 did not indicate that that tolling stopped if the legislature was not in session. So that was a clarification that we were trying to put forward. With that timeline and the tolling and everything that we put forward, the PennDOT has asked for public input. There have been a number of times when public input has been asked since the announcement. There has been outrage within Lemoyne, within Warmleysburg, certainly where I represent, certainly here in Camp Hill, you guys are starting, the signs are great, signs look great. That public outrage and that ability to recognize that at this point in time, Greg will go through the legislation, we need your action to let the governor know that we need this legislation to be signed by him. So with that, I'll tag team and hand it over to Greg. But your activity, you're making your voice heard with the governor and his administration as to the fact that this is not something that this district wants, this area wants in central Pennsylvania, is very, very vital. Right now, our constituents that work in Harrisburg pay 3 times the LST tax. We have the highest gas tax in Pennsylvania, and now we're going to be told to get to work. That means that people commuting into Harrisburg are going to be taxed 3 times to get to work. And that's not what this area is asking for. So with that, I'll hand it over to Greg.
I also brought along a map that shows you the proposed bridges, and I'll leave a stack if anybody wants a copy of it. But it's interesting to note that Pittsburgh, which has, I think, 3 times as many rivers as we do, only has 1 bridge being tolled. And Philadelphia, which has considerably more bridges than we do, only has 1 bridge being tolled. But I think most of you are here because you understand that it might not affect you in getting to Harrisburg. I mean, when I go to Harrisburg, I go probably the way many of you do, which I go through the bypass and I go across the Harvey Taylor Bridge. So where this is going to affect Camp Hill Borough and Warmleysburg and Lemoyne and the bottleneck is that people are smart and they make decisions based on cost, and they will go through Camp Hill Borough and they will take the Harvey Taylor Bridge. As the engineer pointed out, 125,000 people travel on the South Bridge every day. They will go the other directions. I mean, it's kind of like when you pour water and watch water flow, water goes through the easiest points. The easiest points in this case is, instead of spending $2 a trip or $2 a day, which if you think about that, I mean, that's $500-600 a year for the average worker. They're going to come through Camp Hill Borough, and they're going to come through Lemoyne, and they're going to come through Warmleysburg, and they're going to take the South Bridge, and they're going to take the Market Street Bridge. I'm sorry, they're going to take the Harvey Taylor Bridge, and they're going to take the Market Street Bridge. So the pitch that I would hope that you would help make, and I know in talking to many of you, you already know this, that a lot of times when laws are passed or the government does something, there are unintended consequences. And so while philosophically, I'm not opposed to tolling bridges, because I believe we have to figure out a way to fund infrastructure. But keep in mind, we're at a spot right now where the federal government has literally trillions of dollars in programs for infrastructure. And we should be getting that money for Pennsylvania from the federal government to fix our bridges and our highways that we probably don't need to toll right now. I mean, this would not be the time to toll. And as we come out of COVID and we have businesses that are located in Harrisburg that are trying to make decisions whether they keep their businesses there. I mean, large employers that have to be working from home. It will change the economy of the city of Harrisburg too, because people say, well, we're not going to pay for the tolling and the exorbitant parking costs. And so we passed, I don't know if you have the legislation. Yep. So in Senate Bill 382, which was introduced by Senator Langerholt, who is the chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee, and House Bill 920, which was introduced by my colleague Representative Delozier, were companion bills introduced to address as Representative Delozier said, to clarify what we meant when the legislature and the previous legislature passed the public-private transportation partnership statute. So the bill passed in the House 124 to 75, and then I think it passed in the Senate. So what the legislation said was that the P3 board will be required to disapprove a proposed transportation project if the transportation project involves state property and the public entity has not disclosed specific property involved. There can't be user fees for on state properties, and they would have to clarify that there would be the oversight for the projects would revert back to the General Assembly, which would be the House and the Senate. So as Representative Delozier said, this legislation is passed, it goes to the governor could sign it, and then it would start the clock all over again. And it would give the General Assembly an opportunity to debate, and the public we are the people's house, to take these concerns, especially when it comes to Camp Hill Borough and Wemleysburg and Lemoyne, the unintended consequences that, I think it's probably, you're looking at 20%. So you're going to double the traffic on the Camp Hill bypass. And someone who drives that, we can sit at 21st Street in the afternoon at 4:30. And I don't know, we would be all the way back to probably to the Susquehanna River at this rate, if you just double that distance. So that's what we're doing. We in the legislature passed a bill that would fix this, and we need the governor to sign it. And I think the best case you can make to the administration is the unintended consequences. That I don't think they considered what it would do to Camp Hill Borough when they came up with the idea of tolling the 83 bridge. So thank you.
Thank you again. And I would like to next invite our county commissioners and director of planning to speak to the county's response, or whoever wants to speak on your behalf.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jean Fahey. I'm the Vice Chair of the Cumberland County Board of Commissioners. With me this evening is Commissioner Vince DiFilippo. He is the Secretary of the Board of Commissioners, as well as Kirk Stoner, who is Cumberland County's Director of Planning. And Mrs. Packer asked me to keep this to 5 minutes, so I'm going to do my best. And certainly my colleagues will have things to add. But I wanted to very quickly let you know that Michelle Parsons from Cumberland County Public Safety is watching this meeting this evening via Zoom. Commissioner Eichelberger is at an emergency services planning meeting this evening, along with Robert Shively, who is the director of Cumberland County's Public Safety Department. And public safety is critical to what I'm going to tell you here this evening. So on July 29th of 2021, Mr. Stoner and I attended an I-83 South Bridge project stakeholder workshop at the Radisson. And at the Radisson, we were invited by PennDOT to talk about possible impacts of the tolling of the I-83 bridge. And information from that meeting showed that 125,000 vehicles use that South Bridge daily. And then we really got into the nitty gritty of what that was going to mean to people in Cumberland County. So on October 9th of 2021, and I have copies of these letters, I will leave them for you. You can take a copy with you. The Cumberland County Board of Commissioners, along with the East Pennsboro Township Board of Commissioners, Lemoyne Borough, Mechanicsburg Borough, Camp Hill Borough, the Hampton Township Board of Commissioners, the Lower Allen Township Board of Commissioners, and New Cumberland Borough sent a letter to PennDOT addressing our concerns with the potential tolling of this bridge, including problems such as congestion. Cumberland County already has its share of congestion. This will do nothing but add to it. Business impact. We have a business that estimates impacts of nearly $360,000 on its current business. Talked about ancillary transportation investments. Meeting attendees were provided with a glossy map book that showed numerous intersections throughout the region, and we were asked to suggest improvements to those intersections to accommodate the high levels of diverted traffic. While some of those intersections were certainly equipped, others were not, and we also believed that our areas that really need improvement will now suffer from an even bigger lack of funds because of the diversion that is going to happen. We talked about public safety. The Pennsylvania State Police were there talking about public safety. We talked about right-of-way impacts. We talked about environmental justice. Low to moderate income populations on both sides of the river use the South Bridge to travel to work in Cumberland and Dauphin counties. Tolls, a regressive tax that is not indexed to a person's ability to pay, will increase the transportation costs for these at-risk populations. We made that very clear to PennDOT that that is our belief. We talked about alternative funding options. Governor Wolf released the Pennsylvania Revenue Options Committee report on July 30th of 2021. The report outlines a host of revenue options that address the Commonwealth's transportation funding deficit. Tolling is one of 18 options considered in the report. Similarly, the Biden administration is actively developing a federal infrastructure package that could have long-term major impacts on transportation funding. And we believe, I believe that the amount of money that PennDOT will be receiving is around $4 billion from that act over a 5-year period. So there certainly are alternatives available to us that we would like to have looked at. So this letter went to the governor's office as well as a resolution from the Cumberland County Board of Commissioners that we voted on and signed on Monday, outlining the same things that I told you. And so now I want to go ahead and pass the microphone over to Commissioner DiFilippo. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fashi. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us here tonight. I want to thank the Borough Council for organizing this event and thank our state reps for being here. I really don't have a lot more to add that's already been stated, but I do want to make sure that the entire Board of Commissioners, it was a unanimous, the support against the tolling of this bridge is unanimous, and your county commissioners support you. It's very important that we do that. It's very important that we all get together here. The Board of Commissioners did pass a resolution this past Monday regarding our opposition to the tolling of the South Street Bridge. Many reasons why we feel that this should not happen. Most of them have been already expressed. But one thing I want to key on is, as Representative Rothman said, you know, the thought of tolling in itself is certainly a way to produce revenue. But the question I keep asking, why would you want to toll a bridge where most of the traffic is local traffic compared to tolling a bridge somewhere else where most of the traffic is through traffic? Because if this happens, if this bridge is tolled, as has been stated already, it's like a spider web that expands of problems that are going to occur. They may not occur all at once, but they will occur. And it is my opinion that the revenue that this bridge would produce, and I really can't think of any, would be overshadowed by the consequences that will occur. It will hurt local business. It will hamper the effects of our firefighters, our police, our EMS when people try to avoid that bridge, as they will. This is a densely populated area. The population, well, most of you probably know, Cumberland County remains the fastest growing county in the state. All right, we're going to continue to grow. I believe Commissioner Fashi mentioned tolling. This will impact low and moderate households on both sides of the river. I think the engineer indicated that PennDOT hasn't been specific about the tolls, but they're saying it could be $1 to $2 per trip. Folks, a lot of people aren't going to be able to afford that who live here locally. Again, I want to thank you for having us here, and I want to assure you that your County Board of Commissioners are 100% behind you. And again, thank you, and we need your support as well. I'd like to introduce our Director of Planning, Kurt Stoner.
Thanks, Vince. It's nice to see everyone out tonight. Normally in the planning world, when we see a packed room and we see signs, I get nervous. Typically, I always say happy people don't come to night meetings. So, but I think that, when we look at everyone that's here tonight, one thing that's crucial in the planning realm is public engagement and public involvement. So I'm glad that you're here tonight. As we've gone through this process, starting in July with some of the meetings we've had, I think this is what's been lacking. There's been online meetings, there's been virtual meetings, but this isn't just another transportation project. This is a major project for our region. I think it's one that we can all agree upon is needed. We look at the South Bridge, 125,000 vehicles per day. You look at the function it serves. We need the South Bridge. We can't see it go down. We can't see it be weight restricted. We can't see it have lane closure. So we need to do something with it. But I think how we approach that and the funding mechanism we use for that is extremely important. And I think this is the piece that's been missing of talking to our constituents and how it impacts our constituents. So when you look at that bridge, 69% of the traffic that uses that has an origin within 10 miles of the bridge. So what does that tell you? Tell you it's all of us that live in this region that use that bridge on a daily basis that are going to be impacted. If you compare that to the other bridges that are part of the P3 proposal, you're seeing a lot of other bridges that are interstate bridges where there's thousands and tens of thousands of trips that don't have an origin or destination in that region. So other folks that are passing through are paying the fare on that, as well as local folks. But this is a local bridge, and the exorbitant cost of that then is borne by the local residents through this tolling. So I think there's a little inequity that we can see as part of that. Mike mentioned earlier, was a diversionary analysis done? Yes, it's done. They presented at the July meeting. When we look at that diversionary analysis, you can see the routes that are on there. And it's showing, Market Street, the Camp Hill bypass, all the routes we'd say, yeah, these are major routes. But the piece that they miss is that when you look at the immediate west shore, our initial suburbs are built out in a grid pattern. So there's obviously these easy opportunities to get off the main routes and get into our neighborhoods. That will happen. I'm sure that everyone that lives here, you've seen that happen. Anytime there's something going on in the South Bridge or the regional transportation network, you're seeing those trips come into your local communities. And when that happens, we see congestion and we see safety issues. So I think there are major issues that need to be concerned about. And final point, I think, is one that we really need to look at. Transportation funding is not abundant. So we had the report that PennDOT issued, 18 different options that are out there for transportation funding. They decide on this tolling before that report really sees its fair share of attention. So now we have all these other transportation projects that are going to be required because of tolling. They're going to be required so other folks can pass through your community. What about the other transportation projects that you have, that Camp Hill has, that Wormleysburg, that Lower Allen, the other townships and boroughs in this area? What about those other projects that you want to see have done, but you're being told there's no funding for it? So I think there's another point of inequity there. I sit on the Harrisburg Area Transportation Study. I'm well aware of all the projects that come forward through our region. There's never enough money. There's always more demand than money. Now, in this case, we're being told, here's a bunch of other projects we're going to do because we're going to toll the South Bridge. Where's that money going to come from? It's likely going to come from other priorities that you've already selected as a community and say, these are priority projects. It could be bicycle, they could be pedestrian, it could be other intersection projects that will have more value to your community than simply making way for folks that will be passing through. So thank you everyone for coming out tonight. I would encourage you to stay involved in the process, let folks know your views moving ahead. This is what it takes to have positive change.
Coming and organizing and bringing the community together. I would like to introduce council, who are the other folks sitting up here. All of the council women up here. This is our first official meeting tonight after the 6 p.m. town hall. We will have our first full council meeting. And we have Michelle Forbes on the end, Emily Smith, Jennifer Hoover, Sherry Bowman, Mercedes Evans, and Bonnie Benz. And I hope I introduced myself in the beginning, but if I did not, I am Council President Alyssa Packer. So thank you to all of our council members and to our borough manager, Sarah Gibson, for pulling this this special town hall meeting together so quickly. Before opening up the meeting to public comment, I'd just like to give a brief update on potential local responses to this project, which we know has the impact to harm our communities greatly. We've heard today that 22% of the interstate traffic that goes across I-83 bridge will likely be diverted. This will add to the traffic on our already congested roads, increase emergency response times, lead to increases in accidents, and present a risk to pedestrian safety in our walking school district. One thing that hasn't been mentioned so far is that PennDOT did a study of 30 intersections in the region that would be likely impacted by the tolling of the I-83 South Bridge. And that study revealed that 7 were likely to experience substantial delays as a result of the project. Of those 7, 4 of them are in Camp Hill Borough. They are the bypass in Trindle, the bypass in Market Street, and the joint intersection at 21st of the Harvey Taylor Bridge and the bypass. And in looking at their quick look at their analysis, there's not space there to kind of mitigate through structural solutions. So that's why, as I believe Mr. Hess mentioned, the solutions are through changes in the lights. There's not really space at any of those 4 intersections according to their analysis. So at a local level, we're really concerned about these impacts on our community and our pedestrian safety, as well as our quality of life through congestion and traffic cutting through our communities. So at tonight's council meeting, we're going to consider passing a resolution in opposition to tolling the South Bridge. And we are encouraging other municipalities that haven't already done so to consider similar resolutions of their own. Also on the agenda, we have consideration to authorize our solicitor to pursue legal action to oppose the tolling of the South Bridge. So that is an item on the agenda. And we really are, this meeting really is a first step in bringing the communities impacted together in hopes that we can really work collectively in any and every way possible to show our united opposition to this project. So with that, I would like to open this up for public questions or comments. We will answer questions if we are able to, and by we, I mostly mean our Mike Hess, our borough engineer, or the representatives or commissioners on state responses and county responses. And our borough manager will bring the microphone to anyone who would like to speak. If you could begin, I'm sorry, thank you for, if you could begin by introducing yourself and saying, stating your address.
Hi there, Rich Vance. I didn't catch when the tolling is supposed to start. Does anybody know?
Yeah, the timeline is
2024?
23 and 24.
Because there's also an article, it was last month, that PennDOT is also planning on refurbishing the Market Street Bridge. So that means that bridge is also going to be closed or partially closed with the additional traffic and people trying to get around that. Oh, what a nightmare that's going to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich.
Bruce Bigelow, I have a question for our representatives here. It was mentioned that there's 18 potential funding mechanisms that could be instead of tolling, excuse me. Has the legislature considered any of these items? I know that PennDOT is having a terrible time raising money for their tax structure because of a lot of different factors. Their revenues are going down. Are we actively pursuing anything at the legislative level to address those issues?
Yeah, I could start. Keep in mind, we have the gas tax, which is 52 cents a gallon, doesn't really generate income if people are staying at home, working from home. So we did see a hit. We're looking for alternative, also that comes out of the motor license fund is our funding for state police. So we're looking at alternatives to funding state police, which I think is about 800 million a year. 450 million a year. So, and I mean, look, some of these are small, but I have a bill that, electric vehicles don't pay gas tax. And we understand we want an incentive for people to use electric vehicle because it's better for the environment. But there's already a credit they get when they buy an electric car, but they don't pay anything towards the road. So I have a bill that it's based on the average use of a passenger vehicle of about $300 a year. We're debating with the other chairman of the Transportation Committee, Democratic chairman. He's at 180. I'm at 300. I think Chairman Saylor is the appropriations chairman is at 280. So, that may generate $5 or $6 million a year today. But in 5 years from now, when they estimate that 50% of our cars are going to be electric, that's going to be a large amount. I'm not opposed to the idea of tolling, but it needs to be fair and equitable. And I like the idea of the person who brought up, how about do it in an area that isn't, daily commuters, but there's actually some of the, we're blessed in Cumberland County to have all this e-distribution, and we're a transportation hub. But those are trucks that are driving through here. And a lot of them are stopping in Maryland to buy their gas and then driving through to New York and buying their gas there, or Ohio, where you don't have the gas tax. So as far as the other 18 or 17 proposals, because I know the electric vehicle registration is one of them, I think we're open to all the ideas. I mean, even the most conservative Republicans in our caucus believes that roads and transportation and infrastructure is a core function of government. And but I do think, as has been stated too, that there is money available from the federal government that would be, more than I think I figured out it's $75 million a year. They think they're going to get out of the Southbridge. If you charge $2, you have that many people coming through, but that's not, it's a lot of money, but compared to what the federal government has and what Pennsylvania could get. So, I mean, I think that's the easiest solution right now.
The only thing that I would add is that there was also a report put together by the legislature. We had taken a look at many of the funding sources across the board in roads and bridges. And many of the issues, as Greg mentioned, with the motor licensing fund, funding our troopers out of the motor licensing fund takes away money from roads and bridges. Obviously, the underfunding with the more economic driving habits of folks, which is a good thing and a bad thing. Because the money had been supposed to be for roads and bridges. We also have the turnpike issue and the dollars that come from the turnpike to PennDOT that will end next year. That is a huge detriment to, again, the funds coming into PennDOT. So there is a huge funding source issue that has to be taken a look at. Those 18 might be possibilities as well as the ones that we had put forward with the needs, and we put forward a whole package of bills in order to do so. And the idea and the push needs to be getting the will to get the votes there to do that.
Sean Merriman from Vista Circle. This has to do with the design of the bridge, but I think it answers the other things. PennDOT's building this new 6-lane bridge, but isn't including any bicycle or pedestrian facilities on the bridge, which would be a natural way to avoid the tolling without having traffic on other bridges. Is that something the county found and our state reps could push PennDOT to do, to add that design to the bridge? I really thought it was pennies, $500 million.
I can feel that one. PennDOT's position on that is because I-83 is an interstate, that it's closed to pedestrians and motorists, as is the entire interstate highway system. Yet I'm not defending that position, but that's the one that they put out.
Just to follow up, I brought that up as a, when they had their open house. And they give you the same answer, but it's yes, including I-80 in Pennsylvania, trail, and including 322, which I know is not interstate. That also. And then you only have to get down to Washington, D.C. to see. That's it happens to solve that.
I'm Chris Chase, I live here in Camp Hill Borough. I wanted to give you two ideas as a possible backup option with the tolling. And I submitted these ideas to the PennDOT as well for their public comment section. Two ideas I think they could do is they could do maybe a 1-day charge if they go with the Easy Pass. So we don't, for those of us that hit that bridge over and over again, we don't keep getting hit, multiple times in a day for multiple passes on that South 83 bridge. The other thing maybe they could do is for those of us that live in the community, they really want to help the community and kind of discourage all this local traffic diverted through Campbell Borough, Lemoyne, Farlingsburg, is to maybe also offer an Easy Pass annual fee for local people that live in these local boroughs and anyone that commutes into Harrisburg. So that maybe they would pay something, but it would be, maybe somewhat discounted from having to, pay it every day to kind of take that pressure off the local bridges, the bypass, everything else. So those are just some things I thought maybe we could consider if they do go with the tolling option, but also, I can submit these suggestions to them. So they should have those suggestions in their public record. Thanks.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Bob Latham with 712 Arlington Road. I want to just reiterate a couple of points that were made here and clarify for some folks. First of all, they discussed it. We discussed a number of options to tolling tonight, and they are there. I do want to commend our two state representatives here, Representative Delozier and Representative Rothman, for voting in favor of Senate Bill 382. It's a very responsible piece of legislation that would clarify the General Assembly's intent regarding public-private partnerships. The enactment of that bill, the approval of that bill by the governor, is the key point that you need to take home with you today. The legislature has done what they can do. They revised the legislation, they revised the law, they revised the legislation in a very, very responsible manner that would allow consideration of projects that need to be done. Great presentation. Bridge has to be fixed. There are funding alternatives, but the thing that has to be done is Governor Wolf has to pass a bill. So the action that needs to be taken is to get the governor to agree to that action. Everything else, I will say at this point, is somewhat superfluous, unless, there is legal action that council will consider. The city of Bridgeville has taken that action against the bridge on I-79 as well. So I think it's very important to understand that there's really one person in the Commonwealth right now that has the key to put the brakes on this thing, and that is Governor Wolf. So any action that you take, anybody that you talk to, who may or may not live in this community, who may or may not have the ear of the governor, those are people that need to be contacted. Again, I want to commend our representatives for the action they've taken. Appreciate the comments by the commissioners.
There's one there and then one in the back afterwards.
Hi, my name is Andrew. I live in Lower Elm. So thinking about this, like a little bit of both sides here, who exactly benefits from this other than a private consortium with enough money to buy a bridge?
We did, it's, I don't think any of the companies are US based. They're certainly not Pennsylvania based, so.
Hi, Steve Nunn, 120 South 31st Street, Camp Hill. I guess first thing is, I think whatever we do, we should be careful not to have a regressive tax to pay for this. And I want to echo Sean's concerns. I think multimodal is very important. And I also want to just point out, that the legislature empowered this P3, private-public partnership. I did a big project in Colorado, one piece very successful. A good version of it did not over-empower the private side, someone empowered them. And those unintended consequences are the responsibility of our legislature. As is the gas tax, by the way. Our legislature did that, maybe not the folks sitting in front of you, but we need a better way to fund things. I drive an electric car, I cycle where I can, I do that for a variety of reasons. I'm very comfortable with the user fee, not with a punitive one attached to my registration when I drive 6,000 miles a year while someone else is driving 80,000. That's silly. Gosh. The other thing, and again, in the context of not having regressive taxes, hopefully, I think another option would be to toll all of the crossings that are local to this. To take away the incentive to cut through if tolling is really necessary. But the legislature empowered these folks, and I think it's a great observation by the young man over there. In a rush to have some sort of brutal efficiency through private enterprise, you gave too much away. I think that's all I have to say. Multimodal.
Thank you so much. And with that, we are 5 minutes past our end time. We really want to make sure we have time to get everyone set up for a council meeting so that we can begin promptly at 7 o'clock, but we will continue public comment almost immediately after opening our council meeting. So if you did not get to share your public comment and would like to stay, we also did receive a few emailed public comments, which will be shared during our public comment of council. So again, thank you to all of our invited guests, our elected officials. We appreciate your participation here tonight, and thank you to all of you for coming tonight.
I thank you for coming.
All right.
Okay, we did it. It is 7:01, and I would like to call the meeting to order. I would just like to ask that we stand and stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. We'll begin with roll call. Say aye. Bonnie Benz. Aye. Terry Bowman. Aye. Mercedes Evans. Aye. Michelle Ford. Aye. Jennifer Hoover. Aye. Myself present. Emily Smith. Aye. Okay, thank you. All council members are present. I just want to mention that PPP met on December 6th to discuss applicants for boards and commissions. And January 6th, to discuss applicants for boards and commissions, as well as code enforcement officer, and council met in executive session on January 7th for a briefing on Traluco land use appeals. I want to thank everyone who joined us remotely and in person for our town hall on the proposed tolling of the I-83 bridge and the impacts it'll have on our community. We are going to begin now with public comment. This is a continuation of public comment, although you're welcome to address any items that are on the agenda for this evening. So if you would like to speak, come over to the microphone at the podium and state your name and address it. Please limit your public comments to 3 minutes.
Yes, it's hard to get on than anything else I put on today. Good evening. My name is Joseph Gargiulo. I am a member of the Des Moines Borough Council. Came to the meeting this evening in order to hear what was going to be talked about. My wife put me under strict orders not to say anything. But since she's no longer watching, I guess I can. All kidding aside, she did want that I had to be. I thank, first of all, Madam President and council members, I thank you very much for holding this meeting tonight. It's a good chance for us to hear what others might say, hear about the tolling and the problems that other people are seeing. And to be honest with you, as a Lemoyne resident, I did not think of the kinds of things that Campbell Borough was going to be facing as far as the intersection and such. We, of course, have another issue. Long after the tolling is done, if ever, I will remind you that the Pennsylvania Turnpike tolls were supposed to be abolished a certain number of years after it was built, and it hasn't happened. After the tolling is done and the congestion is gone and the bridges, the 2 5-lane bridges are done, Lemoyne will be left with an exit ramp on 3rd Street, right by Herman Avenue. If you are familiar with that, both people here in the audience and the Borough Council, if you are familiar with that, that is not a very wide street. And Herman Avenue eventually is a dead end where we have our pool. That ramp is going to come off, it's going to cross over by our sanitation area, it's going to change our Louder Street access. It's going to run Louder Street behind some residential homes that are there south of, that belong to Lemoyne, that are south of President. And it's going to dump all that traffic and then tell the traffic to turn either right or left. They will immediately run into a traffic light if they turn right. So there will be that problem, a traffic light on Hummel Avenue. If they turn left, they're going to run into a traffic light on Louder Street, which will congest, if you can make a word out of that, you can congest that traffic even more. I ask the borough here and anyone else who's listening to consider that and consider the support they might be able to give Lemoyne as we face that problem, because it's going to be perennial and it will last much longer than any of us plan to think about it. I am very concerned. I'm concerned what it will do to the residents who live in that area. I'm concerned what it will do to their quality of life. I'm concerned what it's going to do to our fire department, whose fire building is at the end of Herman Avenue. So again, thank you for doing this. I appreciate it. I know we could not talk about bridge design during the discussion about the ridiculousness of tolling. But I ask you to keep that in mind. We're facing a problem, and we don't know how to do it. We're a very small community, as you are, and we don't have the clout without the help of bond. So thank you very much for your, and I'm going to pack myself up and leave before my wife gets really back to Vice Chair.
Thank you so much for coming and for sharing your public comment. Thank you to all of the elected officials from surrounding municipalities. It's really our hope that we can collectively work together and can have power in numbers in our small communities here. Other public comment?
Hello, Brian Burton, 2312 Logan Street. I'm going to comment once again to ask that the Borough Council consider a resolution asking for revisions to the current reapportionment map for the Pennsylvania State House. The state law on reapportionment clearly states that the new districts should avoid as much as possible splitting municipalities, splitting other political divisions like county lines, and paying attention to geographical features such as rivers. The creation of the new district violates all three of these. And in order to create the district, it also violates the principle of compactness for the district immediately north in Dauphin County, which has to go north and then reach around and come back south again near the 81 interstate bridge north of Harrisburg to create this unusual and unnatural district on our side of the river. There's this counter argument out here in the borough. I've heard at a few public meetings, which is totally inaccurate, that this district somehow rewrites some sort of previous wrongs, but it isn't entirely possible to draw a district in Cumberland County on the West Shore that is 50% Republican, 50% Democrat. You can even draw a district entirely in Cumberland County that is majority Democrat. So it's not a partisan issue at all. It's about representation. And you can see from the bridge issue that it's important to have representation in Cumberland County for our residents. So please consider such a resolution. Thank you.
Hi, Matt Byers, 105 South 15th Street. I just wanted to express that I actually support a lot of tolling. Right now, I think there's a huge problem with too many vehicles on the road, and increasing tolls and making it more difficult for people to drive is a very powerful deterrent to get on the road in the first place. So we talked a lot about the 125,000. Where's that going to go? Yeah, sure. A lot of it will probably go through Campbell, and that sucks. I would not like that. But I think there are a lot of people that would choose not to drive and stay home. So I think that just generally speaking, increasing tolls, increasing gas prices, increasing taxes, that kind of thing is something that I would very much consider to help kind of curb the number of vehicles that keep growing and growing and growing. It's not sustainable to keep expanding highways and creating new bridges and creating new infrastructure. And I think it's also an opportunity to invest in public transportation, provide these alternative means of transportation, the buses, light rail, bike infrastructure. So I think there is a silver lining and some good that can come out of this. Thank you.
Okay, so seeing no other public, I'm sorry, one other public comment in person, and then we'll go to the remotely submitted public comments.
Good evening, my name is Laurie Kennedy and I live at 495 Country Club Road. First of all, I'd like to thank you for having the meeting up the I-93 toll bridge or issue. It's very important. It's important to the school district. As you know, we are a walking school district community and it could have a significant impact on the ability of our kids to safely walk to school. So that's very important. the comment that I really wanted to address also is, the one that Mr. Burton brought up this evening on the reapportionment map. And really what I just wanted to share with you and provide clarification is, I know that colleague, and I'm on the Campbell School Board. And I am speaking in that capacity because I have some personal experience that I wanted to share with you. But I know my colleague, Mr. Latho, spoke to you during the reorganization meeting about the reapportionment and the impact that it could have on our community. And I was hoping to see it on the agenda, if only for the function of having a debate on whether or not we should support or oppose the proposed map. I'd be very interested in all of your comments because from a school board perspective, this is a very important and relevant issue for us. I have been on the school board for 6 years. I initially sat on the Government Relations Committee. That committee was merged with the Community Engagement Committee, and I have been on the Community Engagement Committee since it's been established. Throughout my tenure on the school board, the 6 years that I've been on, I have had numerous meetings with Representative Rothman, Senator Reagan, Representative Delosier. They are all very responsive to our hearing our plights and our needs. Is very important from a school perspective with regard to the basic school funding formula, the funding for special education, which still has not been resolved. I've worked with Representative Rothman on special education funding. He has some great ideas about how to address that issue in the school district, which continues to be a very important underfunded area for Camp Hill. So I guess my plea is to you, I would be very supportive of at least hearing your thoughts, a debate here on whether or not there should be a resolution. I am going to continue to ask Mr. Latham as president of the school board to provide us updates. And I'm hoping that we will also at least discuss it as a board at that capacity, at least addressing the pros and cons to the proposed redistricting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lori, and I will speak to that briefly. Our understanding was that these comments and decisions related to the redistricting, that public comment needed to be received by January 18th. And since this is our first official meeting of council, our procedure would be to send that to committee for consideration and then come back to council with a recommendation. If we did not feel that we have time with a new re-elected council to give that the consideration it needs to arrive at a decision on that. So I will say that, and I will also say that in response to realizing that we don't really have a committee that would be sent to. I've spoken to Emily Smith, who is the chair of our Community and Business Relations Committee, and we have decided to rename that Community, Business, and Government Relations. So should an issue like this come before us, we have an appropriate committee to send that to for consideration to make a recommendation to council. Other public comments?
Good evening. Sorry for your meeting. I am Gail Gallo. I am the president of the Warren Borough Council and the chair of the Washington Regional Police Commission. And I wanted to get to your meeting about the polling this evening, and I'm sorry we just got out of a police commission meeting, so sorry I missed that, but I did want to introduce myself. I see that some of my council people are here from the room as well. And I just want to express to you that we in Lemoyne are very interested in working with our other communities, the other municipalities about taking a position on the bridge project, the tolling, all of that. So I just actually speaking with our legal counsel as well. And I would love to speak with whomever would be the appropriate persons here regarding that at some point. So I'm happy to give my contact information to you either now or after the meeting. And hopefully we can discuss that further. Again, I apologize for missing.
Oh, we completely understand, yeah, completely understand that there are conflicting meetings oftentimes. If you do need to by any chance speak before the meeting ends, please let Julie or Audrey or a staff member at the table get your contact information to them, because we are excited about the opportunities to collaborate among the impacted municipalities.
I think the more we do that, the better we'll all fare. So thank you all.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Other in-person public comments? Okay, Sarah will read the comments that were submitted.
First email was down today, just to add to our headaches. So I have, in a roundabout way, thank you for helping me to receive 2 written public comments to 2 individuals who were not able to be at the meeting this evening. There's a comment from Jennifer Manlove and Brian Stever, who live at 2920 Dickinson Avenue. They say, we would like to add our concern and request that you oppose the proposed toll for the South Bridge across the Susquehanna River. The I-83 South Bridge is a high commuter traffic bridge. Adding a toll will cause those commuters that already congest the roads around our town to begin to encroach into it. Our concern is for the children in our community and the continued tradition for our neighbors to walk safely in our town. Our children walk or ride to and from school and after school activities daily. And as it is, the amount of traffic that uses our streets to get into Harrisburg has increased in the last 20 years. And the implementation of this toll will only exacerbate that. To cause commuters to use our town streets to avoid a toll is knowingly placing our children in harm's way every day. Second comment that we received in writing is from Brett Miller of 848 Winwood Road in Camp Hill. She says, while I applaud the Cumberland County Commissioners' resolution stating they are opposed to tolling the I-83 South Bridge project, and applaud Borough Council for also considering a similar resolution this evening. The only action that will fall for this is legal action. Pulling of the 9 candidate bridges will bring in $800 million annually, and it is why the governor is pushing this so hard. The governor, PennDOT, and our legislature need to find another revenue source instead of dumping the responsibility on local municipalities of how to deal with the tens of thousands of vehicles per day trying to avoid the toll. According to yesterday's Penn Live article, Easy Pass tolling could begin as early as next year. This means they will quickly and easily install cameras to capture either Easy Pass or license plate numbers and bill the vehicle owner. There will be no toll booths. Tolling is coming and it's coming fast. I strongly urge council to oppose tolling as a revenue source for this project by taking legal action against PennDOT and request an injunction, stop work order on the placement of cameras to capture Easy Pass and license plate numbers. And that was submitted by Brett Miller. And those are the 2 that I have.
Okay, thank you. We have changed the format of our agenda slightly, so we have included a consent agenda, so not changed it from what was published, but changed it from previous practice. So we've included a consent agenda and then reports, generally speaking, from committees and board liaisons, followed by a second public comment period before we will take action. So the intent of this was to allow the public to hear our discussion and our committee reports before taking action on any items that those committees would then present. So I just want to mention that because the consent agenda is a new item. So is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we have more for the purposes of reconsidering reorganization.
Okay.
I'll second
Okay, so since this consent agenda is new, I would suggest then that we pull the approval of the agenda from the consent agenda and vote. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but vote on the consent agenda minus the agenda for tonight's meeting. Or would that be good?
You can take a motion to amend the agenda to remove
the approval of the agenda from the consent agenda. And then you can determine where you want to place that, whether before the consent or after. So I think we want to entertain a motion outlining those two items.
Right. I move to extract approval of the agenda from the consent agenda.
I guess I'll second it. To get reorganized.
Okay, so, any discussion of that? Okay, we will vote then on the removal of the agenda from the consent agenda. All those in favor of removing the agenda itself from the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay, so that has passed. We will consider the agenda itself momentarily. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda minus the agenda itself?
I'll second
Okay, so any comments on the consent agenda?
Just point of comment, if I may. And this does relate to the PPP committee. And I understand that we do have a committee membership identified, though there was no PPP advertisement of that committee. So I would urge us to review the use and purpose of that committee and or consider advertising publicly to that committee. And that we can resolve this issue right.
Okay, and I will just speak to that. The PPP committee has only met as needed to discuss specific issues related to applications and so on, and that it will be, until we decide on this issue, that will be the practice going through the meeting of PPP. It will be announced at the start of the meeting along with the purpose for PPP. So as I announced today, we met, PPP met to discuss applications reviewed for boards and commissions and applications received for the code enforcement officer. So we will consider whether we want to discontinue the use of PPP or come up with some other strategy around that by the February meeting. Okay, hearing no other discussion then, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please vote aye. Aye. And all those opposed indicate that with a no vote. Okay, so the consent agenda has been approved.
I move that we amend the agenda, move to reconsider reorganization.
And I'll second that one.
Okay, and I think we'll open that for discussion now, and I think it'd be helpful just to give a little bit of explanation for the audience.
I'm offering the motion just because of some information that came to our attention about the manner in which the reorganization on January 3rd occurred. As I understand, Borough Council has to reorganize within 10 days of its statutory obligated first Monday of January. And the Borough Code states specifically, please my non-legal opinion, that a council person shall preside over the meeting in the absence of the mayor. So realizing that tomorrow would be our 10th day, again, I would just like us to err on the side of caution and redo the reorganization so that we can avoid any potential
General, to your comment, because some folks may not have been here, but because Mayor Simpson was sick, he was unavailable. So there is a backup plan, however, it should not be the solicitor, according to our documentation. It should have been a borough council person leading that.
There was a vote by a majority to nominate and appoint Mr. Parker as the chair, and then we did a consensus to have me delegated presiding duties over the nominations process. I apologize if I didn't explain that as well as I could have at the meeting. That is a fairly common practice, but now that we have the mayor here, we can certainly allow him to have his opportunity to do that.
Any other comments? And if not, we'll vote on that motion and move ahead from there.
My only comment would be to simply affirm what we did and then move on. That would be my comment, instead of going through this whole process again.
Okay.
I think you need to do the process from the beginning. I mean, not that it's gonna affect anything necessarily, but it might, but we should do it for reals.
Well,
Bonnie, I appreciate your comment and your suggestion. I feel uncomfortable about, again, COVID sucks, right? Let's just put that out there. We were in a tough spot, and we handled it as best as we could at that time. And I appreciate that, but I'm not, we did not vote to delegate the deciding to the solicitor. We delegated in a sense, but I don't think we were aware at that time. And again, just to be on the safe side, I'd rather we just go through the reorganization and the nomination and make it official.
okay, all those in favor of going through the reorganization process again, just to dot our i's and cross our t's and be sure that we are following the code. Please vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Opposed. So that motion carries. So I will turn this over to Clark. Thank you, Mayor Thompson.
Okay, at this time, we're going to accept any nominations for Borough Council President.
I nominate Melissa Packard.
I'll second
Okay, we have a nomination for Alyssa Packer in a second. Any other, I guess we guys vote on that first, correct?
We'll accept nomination, all the nominations and then vote on the first.
Okay, are there any other nominations? Okay, hearing no other nominations, we'll take a vote. All those in favor of Alyssa Packer as president, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Congratulations.
Thank you. And this time I will preside over the remaining, a little less nervous tonight than I was last week. I will preside over the remaining nominations. So at this point, I will accept nominations for vice president.
I nominate Bonnie Betts. I nominate Bonnie Betts.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. And are there any other nominations? Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of Bonnie Benz serving as vice president for council, please say aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed? All right, thank you. Congratulations, Bonnie. And then last but not least, I would like to ask for nominations for the position that I never remember how to pronounce, pro temp.
I nominate Jennifer Boone.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Any other nominations? Okay, all those in favor of Jennifer Hoover as our president pro tem, please say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Thank you all. We have now dotted the i's and crossed the t's, and we are sure we're following our municipal code. The next item on the agenda is consideration of resolution 2022-02 to oppose PennDOT's plan to toll the I-83 South Bridge, and that resolution is included in our packets here, and it's also included in the packet online for the public to review. Is there a motion? Would somebody like to move that resolution? In a second, and I'll second. Okay. Discussion.
Put in here, if I may, regarding signal timing optimization. So what I saw was that would go through the bypass or even proposed along Market Street along with the Campbell bypass adaptive system or something. can you speak to what they mean by including that as within that system and or what benefit the signal timing optimization provide and how does that relate to our four-way all cross stops?
I guess let me start with adaptive signals. There's kind of the old way of triggering traffic signals, and then there's adaptive signals, which is the new. So under the old scenario, there would be a movable wire buried in the pavement that would detect a large metal object or a car sitting on top of it, and that would signal to the traffic controller that there's a vehicle here waiting to go in whichever direction. Adaptive signals are an improvement upon that. They use a camera and they can see how many cars are queued in a particular zone so that they can compute demand, not just that there is or is not demand, but how much. And then they can prioritize which phase goes next based on how much. Coordinated signals can be either adaptive or the old style, although they're typically adaptive because it's newer technology. And they can signal not just a single intersection, but several. So that if you get a slug of traffic moving, you can keep it, you can clear the entire corridor instead of getting caught up again at the next signal. So that's kind of the goal of adaptive signals and coordinated signals. As for how that would play with the dedicated pedestrian phase that you guys have a number of those signals on bypass. Neither one necessarily rules out dedicated pedestrian phase, but both of those technologies would be implemented in order to increase the carrying capacity for vehicles. And a dedicated pedestrian phase decreases the carrying capacity for vehicles because it blocks everyone out while they're pedestrian. So it isn't necessarily an ironclad cause and effect, but if they're moving towards adaptive signals and coordinated signals, they're probably moving away from dedicated pedestrian phase.
Is there a reason why such improvements haven't already been made, knowing we see that traffic and congestion on the bypass now already?
Yeah, I can't speak for why PennDOT wouldn't have done it already. I don't know if it's funding or if they're waiting to correlate it to another project or what the reason was. I don't know the thought process was there.
My understanding is that the borough in the past has pushed back against efforts by PennDOT to change that, and we do own the signal. It's PennDOT's road, but once they install the road or any improvements to the road, the municipality owns the signal from it. So I would guess that if PennDOT requested or suggested that we allow this timing of that signal to change, it would be the borough's choice about whether we did that or not. And I believe that discussion has taken place at various intersections around the borough. I can only imagine that it would have taken place on the bypass. There's been one discussion since I've been here at another location, and the borough said, staff, they're not the staff level, so we're not changing the full stop intersection. So I imagine that has happened in the past as well.
Other comments or discussion of the resolution?
I'll encourage everybody on council to support the resolution. I guess, we've heard a lot of great things tonight, but, just a couple curiosities about this whole thing is that PennDOT just paid $150,000 to do a safety study of this whole area. And then they're just saying, oh, we're going to double the traffic through this area. Yet we didn't even execute on pretty much nothing in that study. Makes me feel very concerned about PennDOT's ability to make decisions and manage things around here. But the other thing I'll just couple on to the fact that we have our responsibility as a borough. We're actually responsible for getting the kids safely to school. That's our responsibility. That's not the school district's responsibility. That's our responsibility, right? So we have to make sure that we protect that infrastructure and that kids can be safe. I mean, look, guys, it's not like you and I walking around town and navigating crazy traffic. Look, we've been in big cities before, but kids don't have the peripheral vision of adults. Most people don't realize that. Their eyes aren't fully functioning there, as well as we know that kids cannot time the speed of cars to be able to figure out if they can cross the street. So I think those two things, coupled with I think PennDOT's negligence in our community already. And I just think we have to do something, so this is my opinion.
I agree, we have to do something. I support approving the resolution. And I have to tell you that the two things that jumped out at me when I went out, as I got said about the tolling, two figures. Their early estimates on increased volume of traffic on the Harvey Taylor Bridge. And it looked like they were only estimating during like 1 hour of peak PM time frame when cars are coming and going from work. So before the tolling, the eastbound traffic, which would be heading toward Harrisburg during rush hour, was estimated to be 1,270 cars. And with the tolling, they're estimating it to increase to 1,620 cars. Westbound, leaving Harrisburg during peak hour, rush hour, would increase from 1,840 cars to 2,510 cars. So it is a significant increase in vehicles. They're going to leave Harrisburg because they don't want to go over the South Bridge, and they will come through Camp Hill. I don't think we really have any choice but to support a resolution in opposition to it.
Question and comment. Mike, also regarding the traffic analysis, do we know, and you said you have not been able to access it or read it, but do you know how far out that projected? Meaning, you know, with the evolution and increase in electric vehicles and bicyclists and electric bikes, you know, how far out did they look and did they take that into consideration?
I don't know this one specifically, but the industry standard is 10 years. Most traffic analysis go for the current, the design year, so the year that it's implemented, and then 10 years beyond.
Okay, I can't, I am in support of the resolution. I can't make the conscious support pulling concepts that Harvey Taylor Bridge and Kendall residents will bear the brunt of this. And as Bonnie mentioned, you know, that's just during 1 PM peak hours, we're looking at more than 1,000 more cars. It does not even incorporate when, you know, AM peak traffic. And as we heard, Market Street Bridge improvements are scheduled at the same time, I think.
And I would add that, you know, speaking toward the modification of the mapping for our various districts, it's been noted that Cumberland County has grown by 10% over the past 10 years. That's not going to slow down. This volume of traffic over the next 30 years in which this bridge would be tolled is going to be multiplied by the increase in development in Cumberland County as well. And so it's significant.
And as has been pointed out, I think our community is particularly unique in that we are a walking school district, and that's why the majority of some residents move here and appreciate that. And as was said in public comment, I can't support polling when it's the safety of our students.
I have a question about the traffic study. Do you know if they were pre-pandemic numbers that they were using?
That's a great question. That's one of the big ones that I have as well. I don't know which they use, because I'm not access to the study yet. But it, you know, it's the instruction of this council for us to get it and to review it. We'll certainly do that. That's a great point, because traffic patterns have changed a lot during the pandemic. A lot more people are working from home, and a number of other changes. So I don't know that, but that's one of my top questions.
Well, hopefully we can get that. And my main concern is that they're basing these very vague toll numbers of $1 or $2 each trip on possibly pre-pandemic numbers. So they're thinking that they can keep it that low, but really if we're going to have significant number of the workforce working from home, they're not going to make the money they thought they were going to make. So we're going to see a significant increase in the toll cost as every year goes by. So if we could get that traffic, that study, that'd be great.
Okay, we'll work on that. The other piece to that is the way that people are shopping, not just commuting. There's a lot more home delivery and a lot more trucks on the road, with fewer single trips to the mall, bigger trips. So but we have some of the very same questions about what was the baseline of the traffic.
Like, I have a question. So we heard the, Joe from Lemoyne Borough Council talk about how the exit ramp is gonna go into Lemoyne. Do we have any idea how that part of the traffic is going to affect us in Campbell?
I think that's another one that's gonna be borne out in the traffic study. They're gonna have to make some kind of assignment for what percentage of that traffic is coming to Campbell versus going a different route. And a lot of those are educated guesses more so than they are well studied traffic engineering. It comes down to major, so there's some of the other.
I don't recall if you addressed it, but the information I read also pertaining to the noise and air quality, it seemed to me that the findings came back that it was determined there would not be an increase or detrimental impact in either regard for our borough. I find that hard to believe when you talk to that.
Again, without having seen their specific analysis, it's hard for me to give a specific response. I would think that the traffic on the I-83 bridge would be commensurate with what's there now, because, you know, the bridge is a bridge. So really, if we're talking about noise, we're talking about noise on the diversion route, so like you can't go bypass. And yeah, more vehicles per day do make more noise as a general rule. There are guidelines that PennDOT has to follow from the federal level about noise mitigation, so that they can't put noise mitigation in certain areas and leave it out in other areas. They have objective standards that they have to follow. I suspect that they've analyzed it in accordance with that. Is it zero increase? I doubt it. But is it enough to trigger that federal standard? I think that's the piece of their analysis. Really.
The other thought around noise is diverted trucks, because if they're gonna make the trucks pay bigger tolls, then I think we would expect that our truck traffic through the borough would go up. And, you know, brake retarders, making all kinds of sounds. Throughout the night.
Okay, seeing no other comments, let's go ahead and take a vote to adopt the resolution 2022-02 to oppose PennDOT's plan to toll the I-83 South Bridge. All those in favor of adopting this resolution, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so that resolution to oppose the project or to oppose the tolling of the I-83 Bridge, South Bridge has passed. The next item on the agenda is to consider authorization of legal action relating to PennDOT's plan to toll the I-83 Bridge.
Make a motion.
Yeah.
And make a motion to consider authorization of legal action.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. So we can open that floor up now for conversation of authorizing our solicitor to pursue legal action to PennDOT's plan to toll the I-83 Bridge, South Bridge.
A couple of questions. As most of us are aware, and perhaps in the audience, you know, we are aware of only one other Western Pennsylvania joint community area that has pursued legal action. I'm curious if we're aware of any other joint municipal efforts, as well as if we were to pursue legislative action, what would be our intended goal in doing so?
I am not aware of any other multi-municipal litigation at this moment as I sit here today. I think that in terms of a litigation strategy, I would certainly recommend the borough reaching out to the neighboring communities. I can work with their solicitors and develop a plan for how we would deal with that. I think, I'm familiar with most of the neighboring solicitors. We represent one of the other communities as well that we would engage with. And then you mentioned legislation. I think that you know, we would also suggest working with legislators because they do have a potential path to resolve this much more economically than it might be for you all through litigation. And we would certainly work with representatives that are here tonight and others, some leadership as well to try and move that legislation through do whatever we can to assist.
I guess we kind of heard tonight, I was just gonna add to that, and I'm just curious what you're alluding to, because it sounds like it's already passed, and it's gonna be passed over to the governor, and the governor can sign it or not, so I don't know what else they can really do, as a legislature.
The legislative process is what it is. I think that what we're seeing here, though, is recognizing a lot more bipartisanship, not necessarily demonstrated at the Capitol so far, but I think when you look at the general public's view of this process, there is, considerable bipartisan view of the bill. So hoping that the legislative process works and folks listen to the constituents, there is a common voice across the aisle outside the Capitol that we hope we can help. It's just whatever we can do to get that word out to the legislature, so maybe they vote how the constituents.
I think we already know that those are teed up, they're already ready to go to the governor right now, so they've already approved the plan to try to solve this problem. So I guess I'm just, what else can I do? I think they've done everything they can.
I think, if I could just comment on this, with respect to considering authorization of legal action, this is essentially we would be authorizing our solicitors to begin exploring possible action. We are not, launching into things, without giving consideration to what the surrounding municipalities want to do. This would be a step that would allow our solicitor the opportunity to reach out to the various other municipal solicitors to see if there was interest in a kind of joint regional approach among the municipalities. There would be opportunities along the way for us to, make next step decisions before going all into a legal strategy approach.
Okay, I'm a little bit confused because I feel like if we're going to take a very slow staged approach to filing the suit to try to put this process on hold, there's no point in doing that. I feel like if we're going to take a vote right now, that literally we should file the papers and allow for anybody else that wants to pile onto it to add their name to the suit. Because honestly, what is the date that he's going to sign? Do you know?
Well, I mean, I did ask Rothman after our meeting, and he said that everything's signed. The Senate is just holding it right now. They haven't released it to the governor to sign. Once the governor receives that, like there's 10 days.
Are you talking about the bill or are you talking the bill that they submitted?
Yes.
Okay.
So, Bonnie, I think you're referring to when are we signing the contract with the
the toll
international consultant?
Yeah, then what's the date on that?
Which I thought was the
I
February.
mean, we were told February, but yeah, so we can assume it's February based on what.
Yeah, and to clarify, I didn't mean a super slow stage approach. I think we vote tonight to authorize our solicitor to pursue legal, to pursue and explore this possibility of legal action. He'll be in touch with people tomorrow and kind of or this week and be giving us feedback on where there's interest, where there's not, and what our next steps.
I would say that they're parallel path. It's not like I'm going to sit here with my pen up while I'm waiting to talk with the folks at Des Moines and Warrensburg. We'll have both paths going so we can move, as aggressively as we can while exercising appropriate caution.
So I guess my question is, if we approve litigation tonight, legal action, are we going to file a suit? Period. Regardless of what the results are from reaching out to other municipalities. That's my question. I feel like, you know what, we need to take action.
I think I have my marching orders, assuming this passes, to move forward with the
Okay.
litigation process.
Okay.
As part of that, I also consider it my duty to you all, as, stewards of public funds, to do what I can to work with the surrounding communities to figure out a way to handle the costs and work with those surrounding communities. So we're all along.
I agree with that. I agree with that. I mean, if the time is short, and we need to apply pressure, there's no time like it doesn't.
So I think to your point, Melanie, we should make whatever we pass be very pointed. And so that it just show, demonstrates something, right? We say explore, explore doesn't sound right to me.
No.
Were you going to respond?
Just quickly, the proposed motion is authorization of legal action. So that if you authorize legal action, I will take your comments here to move as fast as I can.
I just wanted to ask, as you stated, we are stewards of public funds and take that responsibility. So with that being said, what is the best worst outcome if we do file litigation?
I think the best outcome would obviously be, obtaining an injunction to stop that. The existing litigation, while there is, you can read it as challenging the entire program. The risk is that any decision that would come out of that case would be specifically aimed at Ridgeville Bridge that makes up the majority of the papers. So obviously the best case would be just really deal with our overages. I think worst case is, we progress through a fast-paced piece of litigation and we're unsuccessful. To be completely honest, it's not a slam dunk fight by any means. There are always pitfalls in litigation, especially when you're dealing with complex litigation, but we do sort of have the benefit of knowing how the Commonwealth might respond to our action, which provides us with some strategic.
Any other discussion before we vote? One more thing. So our ultimate goal for the legal action would be to, at very minimum, pause the progression of this tolling project. Do we also want to include in there that we are not only opposed to the tolling project, but we are for the passage of Bill 382? No, you don't want to do
I
that?
don't think that would be appropriate.
That's our purpose. Okay.
Okay, so there is a motion to authorize legal action relating to PennDOT's plan to toll the I-83 South Bridge, and a second on that motion. So we'll go ahead and vote now. No? Oh, okay. So we will go ahead and vote now on that motion. All those in favor of authorizing legal action to oppose the tolling of the I-83 South Bridge, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. Okay, that motion carries to move ahead and authorize legal action to move ahead for our solicitor. So, and with that, we are now at the manager's report, so I'll turn it over to you, Sarah.
Thank you. I have a brief report because generally my things that I work on will be covered by the committee chairs, but just a few items of interest. I'll give a little bit more detail on my report because we have a lot of new members. I mentioned this at the December meeting that we've been invited to participate in a public officials meeting to discuss the Market Street Bridge rehabilitation project with PennDOT on January the 18th. Any municipal advisory or public officials meeting, I generally attend on behalf of the borough, but you are all always welcome. Well, less than a quorum of you could attend. attend without it being a big deal. So just let me know if you'd like to join me, but I will attend on the 18th, and that meeting will also be followed then by a general meeting of public comment and an open house. So the general public will be able to come to that meeting after the public officials meeting. So I will also plan to participate remotely in a municipal advisory board meeting with the county commissioners. They have not presented an agenda for that yet. The last meeting I participated in dealt with the county radios and the bids for the emergency services. So they do give some good information at those meetings, and I just like to be a presence when they have those. If I'm invited, I'd like to go to the place. So I'm going to mention the climate action plan survey, and perhaps Bonnie will also talk about this, but I think it's worth saying multiple times. The climate action plan task force has really been working hard to come up with an effective survey of our residents and our business owners regarding their energy usage, their type of vehicles that they operate, because we're trying to gather information about the environmental impact of Campbell Borough as it relates to climate change. So I've said it several times, this team of people that we have is quite a high-powered, really knowledgeable group, and I would really encourage everyone to participate in that survey once it is made available. We'll be promoting it with a QR code because we're that cool, that we'll have a QR code to encourage young people as well as people like me to participate. And that will be in our newsletter, on the back of our utility bills, and on the website and the Facebook page, and anyone you can share it where you'd like to. And that will be available from January 17th to February 18th. We're hoping that people read the survey. The ideal is for only one person in the household, or that person should only fill it out as part of the household. You see it when you read it. But it should take you about 5 minutes to complete it. So, and also I'm going to caution everyone to stay away from the borough office during the week of February 14th. We will have borough auditors in the building, and no one wants to be around when those auditors. No offense, Jerry. No, they will be in the conference room starting February 14th. And we just generally like to work them set up in that room and stay there for the week. So meetings that are scheduled for that week, we will move over here to Prosser Hall, and the auditors do the thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. So with our new meeting agenda format, we'll have reports from committees and board liaisons, and then another period for public comment before action. I do want to mention that the new committee assignments are in the packet, and they're also posted to the webpage. Thank you, Julie, for getting that up there so promptly. So public safety, our chair of public safety is Mercedes Bennett. Thank you. I would like to begin with the mayor's report.
All right, thank you. First off, I want to welcome the new council members. Apologize for creating an issue last week for not being here, but welcome to all of you. The police chief obviously is not here this evening. He's been under the weather. And he'll be back tomorrow. So, your reports in your packet from the police department, they handled 625 complaint calls in the month of December. I'd like to point out they drove 3,991 miles in December. So, fire department, we had 32 calls in December, 77 man hours on those calls. We spent the bulk of December taking Santa Claus around town, which is always a great time. We are in the process right now of recertification of CPR and first aid. We're doing Monday night trainings again last week after the holiday. So every Monday night we spend 2 to 3 hours training, so we have basic first aid, CPR, hazardous materials recertification, and a whole bunch of other important stuff. I believe that is my report.
Thank you.
Mercedes, may I have some questions? Sure. Regarding the report. First of all, and maybe it's better for the chief to respond, I certainly follow up with him, but I had a couple questions. First, the issue of graffiti in our community, is a concern to many of us. So I am curious about how we handle that, what we can do as a borough, or what works, and or how we utilize the resource officer and or
I did speak to the chief earlier this evening regarding your emails, photos of some graffiti that's on the sound wall down near Public Works. Lester, aware of that. But typically, when there's graffiti, I mean, Public Works is about takes care of removal of that. Our public safety officer, school resource officer, Joe Papers, does investigate issues like that in the school by talking to students and whatnot. You know, students tend to occasionally spill their guts on what they know, and it's important to know who did what. So that's probably the main way that the police are able to find out, and they don't always find out. As far as what can the school do? Like you know, educate kids how to do things like that. But vandalism happens in town, and you know, unfortunately, it's great that police can be everywhere, all the time, catch the folks. Great. The other thing is when they do catch them, we need to report the laws. They don't take consequences, whether that's cleaning the TV up or repairing something. It's important to not just slap it off. People don't want to press charges. You know, unfortunately, make an example, in my opinion.
I just have one other question. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Again, this may be better for the police chief, but I was trying to think back and looking at the traffic. Part of the monthly report. Have we ever provided like a comparison to last month? Only so that we could identify or know whether there's an increase or decrease in
We haven't, but I don't think that's difficult to do.
So like maybe like trending rather than, you know what I mean? Like just have like a rolling 12 months, we could see if it's a trend. Yeah.
So I would suggest that this is something that Mercedes could bring to her committee to discuss with the chief and figure out the best way to present the data, and, you know, issues related to graffiti could be a topic of discussion as well. I do know that we have some money budgeted for additional security cameras. And hopefully that those are in the right spots that might prevent some graffiti as well. And Sarah, you had mentioned that normally we can go over it quicker, but you know, the cold weather has made that difficult, but also the fact that it's on stone in some places makes it a little bit more complicated than just like, it's really heartbreaking to see the beautiful stone by Seabird, you know, spray painted, where it's not as easy to just keep over it like it is in places.
At the December meeting, there was some conversation about the school crossing guard issue, and there was going to be a separate to try and hire more and more shift them around.
Yeah.
But I noticed recently that somehow the Eisenhower crossing guard got moved down to the middle school, high school, and it seemed like Eisenhower was left out of the crossing guard.
I don't think that's the case, but let me check with the chief on that.
But so do you know, are they all staffed yet or not?
Yes.
Including the ones across bypass, or if there's still more?
No, it's still one there. I'm sorry, they're not.
Yeah, that is something that I think needs to be taken care of, so Mercedes, put that on your agenda. Your next committee meeting.
There has been an issue, the company that takes care of the crossing guard and finding Finding roads, just like every other business. It's difficult.
Yeah, I just think it's like the most dangerous intersection. So it needs those crowd cars and we could probably skip one somewhere else. In my personal opinion.
So that brings me to our next, the Public Safety Committee will be meeting the fourth Thursday of each month at 4 o'clock, and I welcome your comments and participation. We haven't met yet, so I have no updates, but look forward to writing a report at the next council meeting.
Thank you, Mercedes. And our next committee reporting is Public Works, and that will be chaired by Jennifer Coburn.
Thank you. Just some highlights from the Public Works report, but one of which I don't think was included, but compost facility registration is open, correct? So residents may renew their registration. They should still have their prior card.
We don't need the card to renew it, but they do need to fill out a new form and submit their fee. We did extend the hours, an extra hour in the evening this year. We've increased the cost of the fee, so
And it is open.
it is open now.
Also, I noted, it was noted in the report that additional stop signs have been erected, so, I think only 2 remain. Where are the 2? Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. The 25th Street project is complete or not yet?
We're nearing substantial completion. We had an inspection scheduled for this week, but it snowed, so we couldn't see everything from the snow. We intended to do that. It's snow about 12 inches. So with substantial completion, we will give the contractor a punch list and say, these are the final cleanup items that you can do in order to get your final payment. And the contractor will do those items, we'll back check them, and then the project. will be- So we're very close, although not 100% ready to close that contract.
I also noted, the leaf truck being damaged due to low branches. Does that happen often? And do we just pay that cost, or do we seek reimbursement from residents, or?
There's a lot of low hanging branch issues around the borough. We don't seek reimbursement from that property generally. That actual damage is around $4,000 to the leaf picker that is on the Stellar hook loader style truck. That's one thing that's big in the newsletter coming up. It's also all over the Public Works side of the website about following the ordinance. So everything up along the street within 6 feet of the curb should be 12 feet high. That's something that I would like to try to change to 13 feet at least. That truck is actually a little over 12 feet tall. So even if that tree was up to the current ordinance, it wouldn't have helped us. What happened, it was on a smaller street. It was on South 28. The truck works by a boom out of the right side of the truck to pick the leaves up. So the driver had to be all the way to the left side of the road in order to operate the truck there. So the change we're making on that one, at least, we're not going to take that truck down that road. We'll have to use one of our smaller leaf pickers there. But trees in general and obstructions in general within the right of way. The property maintenance rep from Barry Isa was actually here, I think it was yesterday. I met them for a few minutes to talk about issues. We've got, something like it's pretty common to have temporary basketball goals at the edge of the road on slower streets where kids play in the street. We actually have one that's a permanently mounted basketball goal right at the edge of the road. The goal is not 12 feet tall, so we can't get any of our trucks along the edge of the road there to either pick leaves, sweep the street, or plow snow. Stuff like that is very common around, and that's more of a property maintenance issue. And we have had help offered by the Shade Tree Commission to try to gain some compliance with that.
And before I turn it over to our engineer for his report, the remainder of the Public Works report is in the committee packet, but as was noted about committee, Public Works Committee will meet first Tuesday, 8 a.m. and our first meeting on February 1st. And with I'll turn it over to Mike, and we will also discuss our potential action items.
Sure. Thank you. The potential action item relates to the first item on my report, which is a possible contract to do remote televised inspection of the borough sanitary sewer facilities. Not all of them in the borough, about 1/3. The Storm Water Authority put out a bid to inspect all of the storm drains within the borough. It's a large project, but they felt that it was important for their next 5-year planning cycle to know what the rates like. Where are the problems, not just the ones we can see and know about, what are the hidden buried problems. So we assembled a bid to do that. We realized that because a lot of the contractors who do storm sewer inspection, also sanitary sewer inspection, it would be worth our while to include, it's called a bid alter. So the contractor gave us the base price to do the storm sewer system, and then they said for an extra cost of X, we would also do the remainder of the storm sewer system. I'm sorry, the remainder of the sanitary system. Those bids came in, and they're summarized as a bid summary in my report. And the low bidder for the overall project and the low bidder for the storm sewer portion, which is the one that the authority would be legally obligated to take unless there's some other significant issue, is Raybold. And you can see that they're summarized in the base bid. The sanitary sewer piece is summarized under the alter. So you can see Raybold's price for the sanitary sewer piece was about $344,000. Had one of the other bidders won that, the sanitary sewer piece would be cheap. So if Standard Pipe Services won it, their price was $304,000, so about $40,000 less. Or if Utility Services Group, which is just outside of the borough limits, that won it, their price would have been $291,000. We could have saved, $40,000, $50,000 had one of those other outfits won the sanitary sewer piece. But because they didn't win the overall, they're not winning. So our recommendation is not to award the bid alternate at this time. There are a couple of other options we can talk about more public works committee, like potentially bidding sanitary sewer pieces to standalone bid, or public works is expecting some interest in this possibility of getting their own truck, sort of bring some of this now. So a number of different options there, any of which we think make more sense than this. So if council does not wish to award this bid, then we don't ask for an action. That's the no action alternative. That's the status quo. If for some reason you do want to award that alternate, which is not what we're recommending, then that would require an action to spend that money. So that's the first item. Any questions on that before I move on?
I'm sure I answered all the idea of bringing it in-house, but I just wondered if you have capacity for our folks to take on additional work.
That's one of the key factors. I mean, it's not just the equipment cost, but also the cost of it. So those are some of the other options we want to discuss at Public Works. And I don't know at this point which one of those is going to make more sense, but pretty sure it's not the alternate. So that's the only thing we need a decision on tonight in order to keep the stormwater authority. And then we can talk about the other piece for a month or two, or until we don't. Second item on the report is a piece of good news I'm having to share. The Cedar Park Trail was awarded a grant from DCNR, $50,000 that was awarded for New Year. So the stream restoration project that we're working on there, Stormwater Authority, we're on a spore permit. We'll now have a nice new trail to go along. So that's great news. That also covered the other 50% of the Fish and Boat Commission grant that we got last year to do a canoe and kayak launch in the Little Borough property between Creek Road and Carter. That's going to be a really great project. We're excited about. We'll go to construction late summer or fall of this year. Anything in the water, we like to build it during the dry part of the year. We have some permits to get through. We now know we're pursuing a permit for a stream and trail. So some of the design details of that we'll workshop some more at Public Works Committee. But just wanted to share that.
Just in case, I'm not close to the trail idea, is it the existing trail that runs from Seabird Park the whole way down to Conquinnet? And then there's a lot of erosion along there. Is that what?
It is. Yep, that's the trail. The trail's going to get a new surface. We can talk about what that surface is going to be exactly at the tree level. It's going to be made ADA accessible, which is one of the aspects of the DCNR grant they really like. We can moderate the grades in there to make it meet ADA standards. It's going to have a crosswalk across Creek Road to get from the trail to the boat launch, and we'll have 2 new ADA parking spaces. That's all my report.
The next item on the agenda is the report of the Community Business and Government Relations Committee. Emily Smith is the chair.
Thanks. Do we have a downtown coordinator report?
Oh, we have a brief one for this month. We have a few mixers coming up in 2022, which will be on the website. For downtown, we have 4 events for 2022. So the spring fling will be March 26th, Fun Air Art event will be May 14th, the Harvest Hop will be September 17th, and the Kenny Cane Walk will be November 20th. And then I just noted a couple of the new businesses that have joined Market Street. We have Branches of Life Wellness at 2148 Market, the So Shop at 2207, Birch and Iris at 2205, which is hoping to open, I believe, this Saturday. And then we have a macaroon shop that's coming to 1801 Market. That's it for now.
Thank you. The other item on the agenda that's going to be one of the action items after our public comment is to authorize. So we have this streetscape grant, DCED streetscape grant that expires June 30th, 22. And because of COVID, we need to extend. We need to ask for an extension on that to 23. So I think that's something we can discuss. If no one has any comments about that. But we just need more time. Construction is starting.
And my understanding is that that's pretty straightforward, that will be granted the request if we ask for the extension. So
I just wonder, what's the reason for the extension? Just curious.
Yeah.
There's no way we're gonna finish the project. Ready?
So the project has to be done by that date.
Right. It's like 5 months from now.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've looked downtown.
Okay. So they've given us a 1-year extension already. That was, I mean, they really didn't make much progress at all in the very first year, and they were very understanding of that. They checked in with me from time to time. The last time they checked in, I gave them our status report. They said, would you put that in the formal letter and make that request? So that's what we've been on during the time. But we're hoping that the second year is also a pretty easy action for them, given the progress that we're making. But if we can't get it done this year, then we'll have progress to get it.
So the only other note I have is that we're meeting tomorrow. That we are meeting the second Thursday of each month at 4 p.m. So if you have any questions or comments about what's going on with community business and government relations, please stop by tomorrow, 4 p.m. Thanks.
thank you, Emily. We'll hear next from Mercedes Evans, who is also chair of the Parks and Rec Committee.
Thank you. I received a written report from the recreations director, and some highlights include the summer camp information will be available in the February newsletter, and camp registration will start on March 1st. Some upcoming special events: the Bunny Extravaganza on Friday, April 8th. We have the Kite Festival on Sunday, May 15th, and Memorial Day Parade on Monday, May 30th. The Parade of Lights was a big hit. 1,378 cars drove through the light display, and 4 ABF Pride Cubes of toys were collected. I believe that's twice as many as last year. A big thank you to Centric Bank for being the primary sponsor, and to Audrey Logar, the recreations director, and all the volunteers that made the event possible. I also had the DCNR grant on my report, so I'll just go ahead and skip that. And lastly, the recreations committee will be meeting the 4th Tuesday of each month at 4 p.m. And that concludes my report.
Can I ask one question?
I was just curious, with our decision to implement masking within the borough building, I was curious how is that being implemented at all within recreational programs?
Well, the people are wearing masks until they get into place. And then we can take our mask off while we're doing the exercise. The art classes they're sitting down, they're wearing the mask the whole time. At youth basketball, we're following a school policy where everybody wears a mask unless they're actually playing the actual in the game. Otherwise, everybody's masked up at the schools.
And just to clarify, there has been a decision made by Sarah that staff wear masks at work. However, we are just strongly encouraging mask use in our public meeting spaces. So thus the signs and making masks available for people to use, but we haven't passed any kind of, we haven't made any kind of policy or put it on the policy. So we thank you all for wearing your masks today. Anything else? Okay, Bonnie Vance will be chairing our planning and zoning committee. I'll put that over to you.
There is a really nice monthly report in our packet from the Code Enforcement Office. And I just wanted to highlight that last year, the annual report showed there was $32 million worth in construction approvals in the borough last year, which I thought was amazing, huge, especially given that we were still in COVID. So that was pretty amazing. Our planning and zoning meetings this year will be held on the third Friday of every month at 8:15 a.m. So our first meeting is going to be held on January 21st, and they are open to the public. The other item that I wanted to just add on to, Sarah had mentioned the climate action task force meeting we had this past Monday night. We did finalize the survey. And as Sarah said, it will take about 5 minutes, maybe less, to go through. But the Messiah College professor and students are working to gather data to determine what our carbon footprint is here in the borough. The one thing that Sarah did not mention is we are going to send it out on the borough Blackboard, correct? For people that choose to get information that way?
Right, that's the school district.
Oh, that's the school district?
Maybe that's on it.
Okay, did you mention that?
I did not.
Okay,
No.
okay. So if you would like information coming from the borough without actually having to ask for it, the Blackboard messaging is a way to just have emails sent to you when there is information that the borough feels you need to know. It is not a bombardment of emails, but it's just something, another avenue for receiving information without having to take time out of your day, go out to the website, look for information. It's just another avenue. So I want to highly recommend that as a means of communication. Let's see what else. I think that's it.
Did you, or Sarah, did you mention they will also be in the sewer?
She did mention that.
Okay.
So sewer bill, website, Facebook page, Blackboard users. Oh, and the newsletter.
I'll just comment briefly on the survey. I think it's really exciting. I know I gave a lot of info on that survey because that's what I do for a living. I didn't get a chance to see if a lot of those changes were made, but I think designing surveys is very difficult because I have a lot of experience in it. And I guess I was like, well, should we be looking at the final one to make sure we're gonna get what we need? But I think they did pretty well as amateurish folks from a college perspective. So hopefully we'll get some good information. But I just want to comment on that.
If I could just piggyback on the conversation about the code enforcement officer's report, because the code enforcement officer prepared the report is not with the borough anymore, so I can't answer questions about the actual report. I can compliment our office manager, Tammy, who has mastered the software that none of us has ever used before, and she is the one who actually generated some of these reports from that software. You'll also note that there's a monthly report and an annual report. We have an annual report for this, and we also have an annual budget versus actual finance report. I don't know, in the future, I'd like to do all the annual reports at once, but I don't have that together yet, so they're gonna kind of come in and maybe you'll like that better, in some ways, so it doesn't make you upside the head off one. Ultimately, I will also prepare an annual report, but for the time being, you can just take note that there are a few annual reports and the packet.
Okay, thank you. So we'll hear next from Michelle Bork, who is Chair of the Personnel Policy and Procedure.
Under the PPP committee, there are 2 action items on the agenda this evening. Filling the vacancies on commissions and boards. We were fortunate to have a strong group of applicants to express interest in the vacancies in our various boards and commissions. And I was gonna say, yeah, I'd like to, I move to appoint the following slate of candidates.
So we'll see first. I'm sorry.
I say that until later, okay. And then the other thing is, consideration of COVID-19 week.
So now would be a time for a discussion of the COVID paid leave policy, which is included in the packet.
Let's see. First, it mentions fully vaccinated. And it refers to how DOH guidance, is that as defined by DOH guidance, and how does DOH define fully vaccinated?
They've incorporated the CDC's definition with the consideration of boosting. I did not, as I recall, shorten the Pfizer, which I believe they now make 5 months. But that hasn't been adopted by the Department of Health. So it follows the Department of Health adoption of the CDC provisions. And of course, can be changed down the road as that guidance may change.
My next question was, the approval of that leave would be by the borough manager. If in the event, for whatever reason, leave would be denied to an employee, what would be the process for the family?
So that would be something, you know, if there were an issue that they could come through, I would say the PPP committee, which would be the typical process to elevate that with issue, assuming no grievance type issues that.
Regarding the right to discontinue the policy at any time. I want to make sure, I assume that's by the vote, but it doesn't really specify.
So it's a policy, it doesn't have to incorporate every single thing, but, you know, typically I would envision that coming before the board for the vote to change the policy that was adopted by the board by vote.
And my last question, I was just curious, noting that the footnotes about the hourly and total cost. So how, is there a fiscal, is there a fiscal impact in us providing them leave?
Well,
And can we use federal funds for that purpose?
yes, I sent an update on Monday or Tuesday to Sarah and Alyssa, which had been the previous means of updating on the ARPA guidance. Final rule was released. The restrictions have been greatly relaxed. And you know, things have been quite busy here leading up to a meeting. I expect that there will be some discussion at a later time about, you know, what all of that means. There will be updated frequently asked questions from the feds at some point, but I think the general gist is that the lost revenue calculation is now you're able to presume the full amount of your award as lost revenue, which greatly reduces the conditions on use of the ARPA funds. So likely there will be an ability to use that money. Assuming nothing comes out of FAQs, it's be very surprising for once.
The thing I would note on this topic is that we do have an order and we know some of us will come, but also doing an order, and our objective is to provide each employee with 2 home tests, that, because at first I thought we'll just have a bunch of them in the office, but still I think about if someone's sick or they really, even if we sit it outside the door, I mean, right, they still have to get out of bed. So, we're gonna send 2 home with each person, and that way, if they've been quarantining, they can feel really confident that they're negative before they come back. And then we'll have a few here extra. Those, I believe, it'll cost about $2,000 to get enough for every employee, and I believe that's the type of cost that we can use our money for. Just for everyone's information, we did use some of our money for emergency pay for employees, full-time employees. We already used some of our pay money for that purpose. It doesn't mean we can't use more, you know, to go to the point we have to pay this out, essentially use more personnel costs, but we have used some of our funds for that.
I appreciate that this policy, removes the potential impetus for employees or need for employees to come to work sick, potentially putting others at risk. So, not having to use their sick leave or paid time off, I think is an important factor that this policy addresses. So I appreciate you putting together a draft policy for our consideration.
And this is something that other municipalities are doing.
Yes, I think that one of the issues is that everyone, the reorganization meeting on the first Monday, every community this year and school district. But, we have seen a significant uptick in folks sort of reinvigorating this, because this is generally a policy that had been adopted previously, sort of at the outset. And then with, what we're experiencing now, this is one of the common questions and type of policies that we're being asked to provide for consideration and adoption.
Okay, and the next item on the agenda is the Finance Committee, and the Chair of the Finance Committee is Sherry Wilson.
Yeah, I'm just laughing because I'm the one that's getting stuck with finance because I have a business background. This is okay, I hate doing taxes, so I think it'll. I ran for borough council to stretch my skills. So in any event, just a couple things. I was kindly handed a little cheat sheet here from Jared. I love, in terms of bill approval, we can do that now, right? Because we're not going to discuss that.
We have it under the action item.
Okay, so we'll hold on that. You do have account balances in your packet. I hope that everyone will memorize these for every meeting. We are going to be having monthly meetings like the other committees. Those are going to be held on the 4th Thursday of every month, barring like if someone has a holiday, we may shift it, but those are going to be scheduled for 8 a.m. So you're welcome to come out and look at numbers, and we'll get this going. 8 o'clock, 4th Thursday. And our first meeting will be on the 27th. Yeah, January 27th.
Just one question, and I was looking through the bill, and I was just curious about the school district expenditure. I kind of recall a conversation about that, but I just like a reminder.
So we held money as escrow funds for them. This is not coming off an income statement as expense. We have held this as a liability on our end until they completed the Eisenhower School project that was under. That is now under completion, and they have requested this funds back. That is, I think, about both checks are about 330,000 total.
But it didn't, I was trying to just, because I was trying to match up and to check to see if what I thought it was for the escrow account. But there seems like there's still a bit, there will still be a bit left over, like those two sums.
There is interest that has built up over the years that we have put in the liability and the cash account. I do not believe we can have policy one way or another if we are to return the interest with it or just the amount deposited to our funds. We're returning just the amount deposited to our funds.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention?
From a finance perspective, it's a pretty important area, so, you know, it'll probably take some time to catch up with Jared and sort things out, but, you know, I think a lot of your questions are really great. I think we should try to be creative in terms of how we use our money, make it most efficient as possible. I know you guys have some interesting ideas and things you want to try to do differently. I am interested in, you know, understanding things like the ARPA and like how we can take advantage of grants and things like that, so.
Thank you. All right, and for the next item, we do have this agenda. We've listed all of the various positions just so that everyone would get a good idea of kind of what we have. I don't know that all of them have anything to report. I would imagine some of them haven't met and may not have monthly reports. But we have the Borough School District Liaison, and that is Sherry Bowman. And I doubt you.
I did, and I don't have anything, but I did bump into some school board members here tonight, and they somehow heard that I had this role, so they seem happy. So that's.
So we're gonna revive that relationship.
I got some good vibes.
If you come to regular meetings, you know that oftentimes when we have the school board, the school district borough liaison report, the reports that we have about. Hopefully there will be more regular meetings and we will have reports.
Yeah, I mean, I'm down with that relationship building, so I love this position. It kind of counterbalances the finance one. So,
Thank you. And Sherry, thank you for chairing finance, because you have the most skills. I know you might not feel like you do, but managing a sufficiently large budget during your day job, I think makes you probably the most qualified person on here to chair that committee. So I appreciate you taking that on. The Stormwater Authority Liaison Fund.
I went to their first meeting this week. The stormwater budget is in good shape currently. I think Rachel noted that the stormwater fees collection is still ongoing from last year, though, and I think this is a good number, 93% of those fees have been collected so far from last year, so that's good, and that's still ongoing. As Mike mentioned, the televising of the stormwater pipes throughout the entire borough will be taking place over the next year, and the results of that televising will be completed ahead of, and I didn't know this, that every so often, so many years, new MS4 requirements come out. So these results will be completed before May, when those new requirements come out. So it will provide the stormwater authority a great baseline to figure out what their approach is going to be over the next few years with those new requirements.
I don't know a lot about this, but I know there is some issues around where these pipes are located around the borough, so I'm expecting that'll come up as these things get piped or examined, because they're underneath some of these alleys that nobody owns, so that's kind of an interesting area that may come up.
We'll find out a lot of things about the stormwater pipes. Some we're gonna like and certainly some we won't. And we're just gonna have to see where it goes. The existing GIS framework that the borough has is a good skeleton. It shows us point to point and what connected to what, but that's about the extent of it. When the authority is done with this project, we'll have a lot better information on location and condition, and the actual televised footage itself will all get incorporated into the GIS evidence. So that Lester's guys or us or whoever needs it, out of their fingertips. And like Bonnie mentioned, then the stormwater authority can weigh all of that condition information and their new MS4 requirements and say, this is the next step.
Thank you, Bonnie. Next, we learned that we have a library board liaison position. which we were not aware that there was one, but we are very grateful that Michelle Forbes has agreed to serve as a library board liaison, and Michelle, you have not.
We
that
have not.
time. So yes, Michelle will be serving in that capacity. And the Capital Region Council of Governments liaison, Bonnie has served in that previously and will continue to do so. Any updates from them?
No, our last meeting I think, was in November, at which a budget was passed for council of governments. And other than that, no.
Okay, no other updates. Thank you. So at this point, we will open the floor again. I see that we have two very dedicated, for those of you, for the 5 or 6 people who are listening remotely. We have 2 very dedicated people still here in person. If you have any public comments related to the agenda items that are about to follow, we welcome public comments.
I got one for later.
Okay, seeing none, then we'll move ahead to our new business, which are items related to action. Again, we've listed all the committees here, even if there's no action, just to get used to this format. In the future, we won't list all of the committees for which there's no action. So I'm not going to go through those. I'll just go straight to Public Works, where Jennifer will lead.
Yeah, I move that we reject the sanitary sewer inspection bid alternate and do not award the.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Microphone. Thank you.
I move that we consider the rejection of the sanitary sewer inspection bid alternate and not award the contract.
I second. Okay, there's been a motion to reject that bid alternate and a second. Any discussion of that? And we've also heard from our engineer that they advise again.
Yeah, I just want to extend appreciation and thanks for telling us, you know, this is not in our best interest, we can get a better deal. So, thank you.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion to reject the sanitary sewer inspection bid alternate and not to award the contract, please say aye. Aye. And all those opposed, indicate that with a no. Okay, so that motion carries. We will be rejecting that inspection bid alternate. The next item on the agenda is action by community and business relations.
I move to request to extend the streetscape DCED grant to 6/30/23.
Second.
Okay, thank you. So there has been a motion and a second to approve the request to extend the streetscape DCED grant to the 30th. Any discussion of that?
Only if for whatever reason they would say no, not extending, what happens?
We would have to completely regroup. It's $800,000, so that's not quite half of the base work for the project. I don't think they will say no, but you're correct. We would have to be prepared for an entirely different conversation.
For which we've already put in.
About 250,000 in engineering fees, which are not eligible for the grant. So this is going to be, we're going to start talking about this a lot during the committee meeting tomorrow to really bring you guys up to speed on it. It's very complex where we are now, how we've gotten here, and then where we need to go. So get everybody up to speed on that.
I just want to make one moment regarding that grant. Mike, do you know did we have support from our representatives here in our district that helped assist in receiving that grant?
You're talking about the streetscape grant?
Yes.
Unfortunately, I wasn't involved in that one.
Oh, you were not?
Before the time we entered the board borough, so. Sarah, go ahead.
I know that Representative Rockman did, and I'm pretty sure that Senator Reagan did as well.
Okay. So my only comment to council would be just to keep that in mind with regard to the districting that, you know, in the future, I mean, we have an advantage of having somebody living here within our county that supports us because our representation is within the county in which we live. If this redistricting map goes through, I do worry that the focus will not be on us. It will be more so on Harrisburg. So I know I'm kind of.
Let's say eventually, but yeah, for a number of reasons, Senator Regan, for instance, does not live in our district. So I don't,
Rothman is. who I'm
Yes.
talking about.
okay. So where were we here?
Approving.
Yeah, we need to vote.
Yeah.
Okay. If there's no other comment, all those in favor of approving the request to extend the streetscape DCED grant to 6/30/23, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that motion carries. The next item on the agenda is related to personnel policy and procedures, so I'll turn that over to Michelle.
I move to appoint the following slate of candidates to the following open seats. For the Civil Service Commission, Louis Bennigal. For Human Relations Commission, Brian Stever and Tim Jackson. I was to say Tim Jackson is to fill a vacancy up until the end of 2022. For Capital Region Council of Governments, Bonnie Bentz, and with Sarah Gibson as an alternate. For the Cumberland County Tax Board, Sarah Gibson. For the Planning Commission, Doug Boswell. For the Rec Commission, Justin Chapman and Jamie Lawrence, with Jamie Lawrence filling a vacancy that would expire in 2022. For the Stormwater Authority, Zach Willard. Kirk Sahanich. For the Zoning and Hearing Board, and Susan Sice.
We had talked about her filling as an alternate,
As an
and
alternate.
what we determined was that we have to establish that position
Oh,
by
sorry.
resolution. No, you're not sorry, this is all bringing you information, so we need to create that position in order to appoint it.
Okay.
So next month's meeting, and I don't know, when Susan does this.
Yeah.
At next month's meeting, we'll have a resolution on the agenda to create the position of alternate to the zoning hearing board, and then a secondary motion to appoint. I will assume would be Susan, who you have planned to appoint this evening. So she'll hold off, but there is no zoning hearing this month, so it's not. Proclamation.
So is there a second for that motion? Second. Thank you, Bonnie. Okay, so there's a motion to appoint a full slate of candidates that I won't repeat, and a second. Any discussion of that?
One comment on question, I just want to extend thanks to Zach Willard for continuing his service. Nominated before your term, so, quite lengthy. So I just thanks to him, but also, if I remember correctly, there might have been a were there other positions opening that are not being filled this evening?
That's correct.
Okay.
We don't have volunteers for those positions yet, so we're working on finance and volunteers, so we'll be talking about that.
And those who held those positions previously continue to do so unless.
Well, the term is up, so technically those positions are.
Okay, all those in favor of approving the slate of candidates as outlined by Michelle, please voice your support by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no. That motion carries. Michelle?
Yeah, I have another one. I move to adopt the COVID-19 paid leave policy that's presented in the packet.
Is there a second? Okay, Bonnie Benz has seconded that motion. Any discussion?
I just want to say I support the policy. I think it is in the best interest of our employees to do so. I do have reservations about the process through which it occurred. So as I mentioned earlier, I'll just offer the recommendation again that review the purpose and use of the CPP committee, and as appropriate, we have within CPP meetings.
Just to clarify, this did not go there, but yes.
Right, but in normal circumstances. Thank you.
Right, so you're just saying, just to reiterate more clearly, that, we should be very clear to the letter of the law or the requirements around the Sunshine Act. And we don't want to have any areas of gray, because a lot of us ran on transparency, so.
Yes, my one caution would be that, as you know, this policy arose from a conversation about confidential medical information of employees, which pursuant to ADA and EEOC provision, we must maintain confidentiality, which is an executive session topic of the Sunshine.
We can
Okay.
discuss later.
Okay, so all those in favor of adopting the COVID paid leave policy, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, that motion carries, and the next item on the agenda is payment of the checks and is turning it over to Sherry.
Yeah, it's cool.
I don't want to say.
I don't even know if I can read these numbers, I'll have dyslexia, but, okay, so we have to make a motion here to pay the checks in the amount of, that sounds really like a good number here. $1,292,494.90. Does anyone want to?
Yeah, is there a second for that motion? Okay. Thank you. And if people can turn off their microphones, that'd be great. All right, so there's a motion to pay the bills in that amount and a second from Emily Smith. And is there any discussion with those bills? Further discussion?
I mean, I don't have a discussion as the finance chair. I'm just trusting that our prior council folks knew what they were doing and we spend the money properly.
Yeah, and I will say that we are fortunate to have Jared, who has much expertise in this area and is a CPA and has audited, previously worked in the capacity of auditing municipal governments. So we are very fortunate here. Okay, all those in favor of paying the checks in the amount of $1,292,492,000, $490. Whatever, and totally 90 cents. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. All right, that motion carries. We paid the bills and there is no further action on the agenda. We will now open this up for public comment. Our final public comment period, same rules.
Take this off of this. Hi there, Richard Mance, 2000 Princeton Avenue. First of all, welcome to all the new members. Pre-COVID, pre-other incidents that caused most of you to run. The community and business relations also had another woman that represented that organization specifically. And I've talked to her several times. I don't remember her name, I'm sorry.
There we go.
And I floated an idea to her and she thought that was a good idea. And now that you're kind of building relationships due to the bridge with the surrounding bureaus, now's a good time to bring this up and work with them. I propose back to the community and business relations to implement a West Shore Restaurant Week to promote the West Shore restaurants. Kind of like Harrisburg has, because it's very successful and it gives the restaurants a chance to show off their cook skills. And it brings people that wouldn't normally come to your business to them. Camp Hill doesn't quite have enough to do it on its own, but if you get Lemoyne, New Cumberland, Lower Allen, there's some really good restaurants in this area. And don't run it against it, Harrisburg's, but in cooperation with them. Maybe you can contact them to see how they went about doing it. I just think that would be really good for the businesses to show off the local community. Plus, you get the people down here to the restaurants and they might do to hit the other shops.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Eric, thank you. I will take that up with my committee. Also, I'm your neighbor, I live in 2002 Columbia Avenue. So.
Oh, okay.
Nice to meet you, I'm Emily. I have 2 small dogs, if you guys can get out.
Okay.
Your friendly.
Richard, when does Harrisburg Toll Bid speak?
Well, it's actually 2 weeks and it's in September. They already have their websites and the Facebook stuff's already publishing it now.
All right, thank you. Seeing no other public comment, it is now time for council to offer closing remarks if they wish to do so. So I will, we started with Emily last week. I'll let you break this week. Let's start with Sherry and we'll just go around. And if you have anything you want to share, please do so.
I think it's a great meeting. I do like the way we're engaging with the community in a more open way, at least acknowledging and thanking them for comments. I think that's a huge step in the right direction. And if, we're allowed to, interact a little bit more casually at these meetings, I think it just makes more people want to come. So I think my evaluation is we've had a good first meeting.
Thank you to the 2 members of the public that stuck around. It was a very long evening. I'm very excited to work with everyone here, and I really trust the staff that's been hired with their level of expertise. So I look forward to our next meetings.
I would just simply ask that each of you evaluate the reapportionment of the maps and perhaps individually, if you agree that it's not to our benefit to separate ourselves off from Cumberland County and be represented in the Dauphin County district, that you would send a letter, please, expressing your opposition.
Just a few things and to add on to Bonnie's comment, I think it's PA redistricting that's fine. That's a public and civic comment, and that is open until the 18th. Okay. And meanwhile, just as an update, I don't recall how the congressional maps change representation, and in evaluating, I would look at both the House and Senate. But regarding congressional, I think the House just has to plan today. So the Senate will be looking once that, but that's the information. But I also extend appreciation for the public engagement and for holding all of us for holding the town hall meeting, and just to recapture again some of those calls to action that were offered this evening that I heard is that individuals can write to the governor's office and express support for Senate Bill 382. I will tell you that it's sitting over in the Senate Rules Committee, so it is not, it has passed those chambers. Because the House amended it, the Senate has to agree with the change. You could sit there for a while, sit there for just a little bit, they're back in session next week, but again, that timing could change. So you can write to the governor's office to support Senate Bill 382. Also, I'm aware that Congressman Glenn Thompson wrote a letter to the governor's, to the governor, no, to PennDOT District 10. So we could consider, or if residents wanted to ask it of him, our congressperson could potentially write a similar letter opposing. And then I think lastly, I just wanted to say thank you to Julie and Alyssa for trying to fix the video. So hopefully we get good feedback about that. And thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. You guys are great. I'll see everyone. I've got another meeting tomorrow at 4 o'clock. So come back if you're interested. We can talk about restaurant week. Thank you to everyone. It's exciting.
Thank you, and I'll just close by just saying thank you for a great town hall and everyone on the council for all of your involvement in the process. And is there a motion to adjourn? All right, Bonnie has made a motion to adjourn. The meeting is adjourned.
Yeah, not the longest hell.
You know, I've been in that so many times. I can't really.